You are, Mr. Tarantino.
Okay. At this time, I would like to reconvene the regular board meeting. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Hall. Mrs. Hall. Solis.
Present.
Pike.
Here.
Segura.
Here.
Tarantino.
Here.
Janney.
Hall's here.
Here.
There's Mrs. Hall. And Mr. Collier won't be joining us this evening.
Okay, thank you. Will you please stand and join me in a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance? Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. The board met in closed session preceding this meeting to discuss the following issues: public employee discipline, dismissal, release, reclassification, reassignment, resignation, transfer, Government Code Section 54957. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, paragraph 4 of subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9. Conference with labor negotiator, Government Code Section 54957.6. The board took no reportable action. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the May 11th, 2020 regular board meeting with flexibility. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Solis.
Moved by Solis, seconded by Mr. Segura. Madam Clerk, will you call for the vote?
Hall.
Yes.
Solis.
Yes.
Pike.
Yes.
Segura.
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
President Tarantino, I have a request.
Yes, ma'am.
Could I be called last this time for the votes instead of first?
I don't see where that would be a problem. I don't know. I don't see where that would be a problem. Madam Clerk, would that
Thank
be a
you.
problem?
No.
Okay. All right. At this time, we will now provide an opportunity for the San Diego County Office of Education representative, Dr. Mark Scavarna, to make any comments should he want to.
No comment at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. We will now have an update from our superintendent, Dr. Janney. Dr. Janney.
Thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Welcome to our board meeting, everyone. This past week, Governor Newsom moved some retail businesses, parks, and beaches into Stage 2, modifying the state's stay-at-home order. And this is part of a larger 4-stage process that would eventually lead the state to full reopening. At this phase, we have begun to see certain changes with restrictions. The renewed energy in our county is promising, but we cannot become complacent. Our state is phasing in Stage 2 incrementally, and at this time, schools are not included to reopen, and we are a significant distance from being able to return to the types of in-person events that create a normal community feel. So one of the prevailing indicators marking our county's ability to loosen stay-home orders any further is a recorded 14-day period without a COVID-19 related death. Until we reach this point, our state and our county will not allow school campuses to loosen current orders further. So we are not yet able to begin returning to campus. We want to urge all members of our community to continue following the guidance of the county health and state officials. Now I'd like to share a couple of, but some staff and student recognitions. It's that time of year for Employees of the Year announcements. We typically host an employee recognition sponsored by our Grants and Communications Office. This year, we're approaching it a bit differently, and that's kind of obvious. So if you're an Employee of the Year, if you're retiring, or you have completed 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, or 45 years of service to SUHSD, information is forthcoming about how we're going to celebrate those incremental years and your selection as Employees of the Year. But meanwhile, let's celebrate who those Employees of the Years are. We have 6 Teachers of the Year that, as you know, have the option of going on to the County Teacher of the Year. This year's selection include Andrea Arroyo from Eastlake Middle, Alyssa Graham from National City Middle, Nicole Kransberg from Sioux High, Louis Maroney from Alta Vista Academy, Brett McCarty from Granger Junior High, and Tina Tom from Chula Vista Middle. So congratulations to the Teachers of the Year. Our Counselor of the Year is from Eastlake High School, Kristen Areno. Congratulations to Kristen as SCGA Counselor of the Year. And then we have our Classified Employees of the Year for our Office Technical and Business Services. That's CSEA Chapter 471. From Montgomery Adult School is Samantha Barba. From CSEA Chapter 731, our paraprofessionals, it's Janet Molina. For our Confidential Employee of the Year is from Fiscal Services, Carolina Zimmerman. Our NAGE from Maintenance Employee of the Year is Richard Morrell. And our Operations Support Services, CSEA Chapter 258, is Irma Hurtado Ornelas. Congratulations to our Classified Employees of the Year. And then finally, for Management Employee of the Year, it's Julissa Gracias from Southwest Middle. So congratulations to all of our Employees of the Year, and you'll be hearing more from, hopefully you've been seeing some tweets about our Teachers of the Year and some of the videos and recordings that they have, but there'll be more information coming from Grants and Communications. We also want to say congratulations to the Olympian girls wrestling coach, Chandra Peterson, for being named Prep Coach of the Year. That's for the entire South CIF County San Diego section. So congratulations to Chandra Peterson. We also want to congratulate Dr. Salazar, Alex Salazar, Assistant Principal at Sioux High, completed his doctorate in educational leadership. And then the Greater San Diego Science and Engineering Fair did happen this year. Happened before the COVID-19 closure of schools, and over 800 students submitted their projects to the Greater San Diego Science and Engineering Fair. 574 of those projects were accepted. Of those 574 projects, the top 100 winners were recommended to go on to the California Science and Engineering Fair. But like many other events, the state competition was canceled due to the COVID outbreak. Nonetheless, we did have one Sweetwater student who was recommended to the state finals, and congratulations to Benita Vista High School senior Aurora Chakowski with her teacher, Dr. Mardal. And in addition to Aurora winning that top award, unfortunately didn't get to go to the state though, we had several students who were recognized with Professional Society Awards, and I want to name them. The American Chemical Society Award went to Lucky de Guzman from Chula Vista Middle, and his teacher, Miss Tina Tom. The Association for Women in Science Award went to Dana Coates from Rancho Del Rey, with Dana's teacher, Mr. Paul Osuna. The BD Advancing the World of Health Award went also to Lucky de Guzman from Chula Vista Middle, his teacher, Miss Tom. The Marine Technology Society went to Aleda Guerrero from Chula Vista Middle, and teacher, Miss Gina Siclaso-Caro. The NASA Earth, so there are 2 awards here that went to Aurora Chakowski, as well as being in the top 100, and her teacher, Dr. Mardal. She got the NASA Earth and the San Diego County Water Authority Award. And then also from Benita Vista High, Sabrina Sanchez and her teacher, Dr. Mardal, got the San Diego Post of the Society of Military Engineers Award. And the Society of Women Engineers Award went to Alondra Villa from Chula Vista Middle and her teacher, Miss Gina Siclaso-Caro. Finally, the Broadcom Masters nominee for Chemistry went to Genevieve Bella from Chula Vista Middle, teacher, Miss Tina Tom. So, like I mentioned early in my message tonight, we will follow state and county guidelines as we address how to move forward with the COVID-19 environment. We have accomplished so much in such a short time during the outbreak of COVID-19. And we were only able to do that because we share a common purpose. And all of us are working together to keep everyone as safe as possible. We've stayed home, except for essential reasons, to keep everyone safe and healthy. In our district, schools and offices were closed. We listened together, we learned and are still learning together, and we rediscovered what unites us. We figured out how to serve meals to students during this time. We figured out how to provide instruction via distance learning. We figured out how to continue the daily operations of a large urban school district remotely and safely, including completing the third interim budget report that'll be on our agenda tonight. Governor Newsom, a couple of weeks ago, also made a statement about schools reopening in late July or early August, whether that's through distance learning or brick and mortar. As we know, our school year already opens in late July, but will that be possible? At this time, we don't know for sure. However, as time marches on, we still need to be prepared for a variety of scenarios. So keeping that in mind, we are moving forward again with a shared common purpose and goal. And that goal and common purpose is to open the 2021 school year in late August or late July or early August, like the governor said, with detailed plans to address a variety of educational and operational options. And as with every major plan or strategy, with the potential to far-reaching tonight. Number one says we will plan for a reinvented sense of normal operations on the first day of classes. Number two, we will in everything we do work to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of students, staff, and community. Number three, we will incorporate our LCAP goals into our overall plan. And number four, we will think through the unintended consequences that may alter our plans, create planning scenarios, and communicate clearly at each step. That is why I'm sharing this plan tonight with all staff and community. There are 4 working groups that will be meeting and focused on responding to the guiding questions within the document. These questions come from the County Emergency and Recovery Planning Team, as well as Hanover Research Resources, and other resources being developed during the crisis. The moment we closed schools, the guiding questions were already being discussed and developed. The 4 work groups will identify solutions and answers to the questions in these areas: teaching and learning, health and safety, family and community engagement, and systems and equity as a common thread throughout the process. As you can tell, the 4 work groups are aligned with our 4 LCAP goals because as we looked at the questions, it made sense to approach it from that common understanding. The same cabinet member who is responsible for the LCAP goal updates at the board meetings will be the facilitators of these work groups. So far, we have shared the plan with our labor leaders, principals, directors, and board members. Tomorrow, we'll be sharing it with everyone in the district and the community. We invited our labor leaders and other leaders to pick and join one of the 4 work groups to get started. The group membership will grow to include other staff, students, families, and community stakeholders. We will have 2-week check-ins to monitor assessment, status, and development of each group's work. We appreciate how we have approached our work together as a district during COVID-19. It is apparent that resiliency, self-reflection, and empathy are the common traits we are exhibiting as a Sweetwater community right now, combined with a sense of moral purpose to do the best we can for the students and families we serve. We have lots of work ahead of us, but we have a staff and a community who are willing and capable of reinventing or reimagining our new normal with unlimited possibilities. We invite everyone to join together to make that happen. Thank you very much, and please stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Janney. And
The next item on the agenda, since we don't have our student board representative with us, will be public communication on non-agenda items. This is the point on the agenda where members of the public may address the board on any matter not on the agenda and have 3 minutes each to do so. The Board of Trustees cannot legally take action on or respond to matters not posted on the public agenda, but will refer matters to the superintendent's office for review and report. Speakers' comments were presented in written form prior to this meeting. So, Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak on non-agenda items?
Yes, I have 3 speakers. The first
Okay.
one is Kathleen Cheers.
Okay.
She says, "Good evening. It is good to see the SUHSD day is healthy. I appreciate the opportunity to share via Ms. Facetto's reading of my comments versus the requirement of attendance during these unprecedented times. Hopefully you will continue to allow written responses into the foreseeable future. Although I am sure you will miss seeing this lavender-haired senior, I need to protect the senior times 11 years, Mrs. Cheers. An observation, you all seem much more relaxed and attentive. Respectfully, I am curious regarding the contracts we have engaged in for services we are no longer using. For example, allied waste, vehicle insurance, delivery services, etc. Has any direction been given to purchasing to review and negotiate amounts due? We, the community, would be very interested to learn of savings Sweetwater has endeavored to recover. Dr. Salkeld, once again, I must state publicly, I would rather run through hell carrying gas cans than be in your position. While all, with capitals ALL, raised Cain demanding to know how we could find ourselves in this financial debacle, you now thoroughly understand the tough choices that must be taken to float the ship. As a tax-paying community member ×2, pay 2 property taxes, I appreciate you and your staff. And while the tough financial decisions are hard to swallow, they must be done. President Tarantino, question. What steps are being planned for our more seasoned teachers? If we RIF all of the younger teachers and our most tenured teachers are placed at risk, what then? What if we go to the well to hire more teachers and the well is dry? What is the backup plan? Lastly, question, Mr. Tarantino, if I may ask you to ask Dr. Salkeld, if SEA voted to give back the furlough days, would it save teaching jobs? I thank you all for your time. Stay safe and healthy. The next comments are from Nick Marinovich. Good evening. It is just a few months until the end of the road as bond chair with my term expiring on June 30th after over 8 years of service. While there have been a number of improvements, the state of bond oversight is worse than when I took over as chair during the corruption years and over 8 years ago. The district is in worse financial shape by far. For someone who has poured countless hours into doing my job as chair representing the Bond Oversight Committee, it is particularly discouraging from multiple fronts. The Oversight Committee has been marginalized and ignored. Our requests for information have been rebuffed. This is disrespectful of these volunteers and those past committee members who have served proudly without any compensation. To add insult to injury, there was an incident last year that happened to me that was very personal that I have not forgotten about, and it is documented. I will cover that after my term is over when I can fully speak my mind and not hurt the efforts of future CBOCs. A volunteer deserves respect. And the next comments are from Stephanie Hubner. As we have moved into this unprecedented time of distance learning, once again, teacher librarians have stepped up to be learning leaders of this district. We led trainings, assisted staff, students, and administration with getting all students on track to begin learning in the distance education model. We created an Ask a Librarian portal for students and parents, guardians to ask questions through, and we have had hundreds of students and guardians submit inquiries. We work with teachers to design remote lessons, create websites filled with curated lists of resources for students, and worked with TOSAS to make the distance learning platform that Sweetwater rolled out. We are now being directed to prepare for collection of assets, millions of dollars in assets. That is some of the core work of librarians, asset protection. But as of June 5th, there will not be a single teacher librarian left. So I ask you again, who will do that work when we are gone? Who will clean up the mess that will be left by COVID-19 and a lack of foresight on behalf of the Sweetwater Board of Trustees? Who will collect your millions of dollars in assets? Without teacher librarians, I wish you all the best of luck in accounting for those lost millions to the public. There are no further speakers.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda is the formation and approval of the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, will you please read the agenda items that have been pulled?
Yes, the following items are pulled. F3 by staff, Mrs. Hall, and the public. Item F4 by the public. Item H1 has been withdrawn by staff. Item K1 by Mrs. Hall and Mr. Segura. Item K2 by Mrs. Hall, Mr. Tarantino, staff, and the public. Item M1 by the public. Item Q3 by Mrs. Hall. Item Q4 by Mrs. Hall, Mr. Segura, Mr. Tarantino, and the public. And item Q6 by Mrs. Hall, Mr. Tarantino, and the public.
Okay. Madam Clerk, will you, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Nick. I'll second.
Moved by Segura, seconded by Pike. Madam Clerk, will you call for the vote?
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino,
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, at the beginning, we said that we were going to adopt the agenda with flexibility, and with that, I would like to move K2, the report on the fiscal year 2019-2020 third interim financial report, to the top of the agenda without objection. Is there any objection? Okay, then we will move to K2.
I believe we will have the staff presentation first, and then
Yes.
we'll take the public comment.
Absolutely.
Dr. Salkeld.
Good evening, Dr. Salkeld.
Good evening. Can you see the presentation okay? The transfer?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, good evening, President Tarantino, Board Trustees, Superintendent Janney, Cabinet members, and the public. So what we're going to share today is the third interim report in terms of where we're at with our budget for 1920. But before we go into the details with the overview and the next subsequent slides, I'd like to start off the presentation with commending the Finance and the Fiscal Services collective team. We've done a lot of this work as it relates to third interim, as well as it relates to the budget in general for next year, for 2021, all remotely. Soon after Governor Newsom released, enacted the stay-at-home orders, our team quickly turned around in mid-March and started to work remotely. That it's a very different platform for many of us. We had to learn things being on Zoom, that kind of platform. Then we shifted to MS Teams. So collectively, everyone has been very adaptive to the changes and flexible. So I just want to commend the team. They've done a phenomenal job in what we're presenting to the board tonight, and then certainly in the upcoming weeks when we bring the budget to the board on June 8th. So I just want to give them kudos for that. So as you see here with the overview, what we're going to go through is the timeline, share that point of reference for the board as we've done in prior presentations, highlight what the specific ed code is with the third interim, go through the various multi-year assumptions, what we know as of today, but also what we might know in the future or we may not know in the future in terms of, there's a lot of uncertainty, so I'll go through those items as well. And then what are the key changes that, from second interim to where we're at with the third interim, and then look overall where we're at with some budget solutions as well as our cash flow projections, and provide some updates in that area. Okay. So in terms of this slide, again, it's just that point of reference, because when we're doing our work in finance, we're working actually in 3 years. That's why we've color-coded this. When you see the blue, we're looking retroactively to the prior year, 18-19. What you see in green is the work that we're doing for 1920, and that's one item that we're bringing forward today, is the third interim as it relates to 1920. But at the same time, what we shared back as a result of the governor's initial budget proposal back in January, what's in yellow, is the work that we do in regards to next year. So we're toggling between among three different years. One thing that I want to point out where we're at right now, in this block here that we've got shaded or kind of outlined in red, by this point, typically the governor would have released his May budget revision by the 10th. It would have been probably by Friday of last week. But with a lot of the changes that I'll highlight here in a little bit, the Department of Finance and the governor's office, he's expected to release the May revision by the 14th, by this week. So I don't have any of those specifics today, but I'll highlight what we do know. One thing that has changed, and what you see here as we look ahead for the month of June, with end June 22nd, which is the public hearing on the budget and then the final adoption, what's different is the Local Control and Accountability Plan, the LCAP. That is an item that the governor has issued an executive order because we will not have, because of the current environment with COVID, have that public engagement and interface with the community. The LCAP document, which is actually kind of three-part, the document, the plan, the annual update, and the budget, the parent budget overview, is all being deferred to December. So that will present in subsequent months. However, when we're building the budget, none of our timelines over the course of since COVID and all of these scenarios occurred in March, none of the financial timelines have been extended. So we are still having to incorporate, according to our local control funding formula, the LCFF calculator, about $55 million is part of the LCAP plan. So we do have that and will have that accounted for in our budget that we bring forward to the board in June. So that is still a deliverable that we'll be bringing forward. And then as we go to the next slide, again, it's just that visual. What we do in terms of the third interim is look at data of our actuals. We did get our payroll file from the county and have that reflected and posted. So we look at what our actuals are through the month of April, and we reevaluate, take again another opportunity at where is our budget? Where do we anticipate that June 30th financial statement to look like? And that's what we do with each of those interim reporting periods. Like we did at first interim, that was looking at actuals through October 31st. Second interim, looking at January 31st, and now we're at the third interim. What's unique with third interim, as noted here on this next slide with the California Education Code, the reason why we're presenting this item or this report to the board is because at second interim and also at first interim, the board did certify that the budget is negative. And that has been reaffirmed by the County Office of Ed by a subsequent letter because when there's three different certifications during first and second interim that the board takes action on or has an option to take action on. Positive means the district can meet the obligations in the current year and the two subsequent years. A qualified means that you'll meet the obligations for the current year, but there's some concerns in the out years. Some risk there related to the finances. And the negative is there will be potentially concerns with 3 years of the financials, and particularly for Sweetwater in this given year, and you'll see in a subsequent slide, there is still a negative projected fund balance, so hence the negative certification. When that is done at second interim, it requires this third interim, and it's a scaled down report. It's not as extensive as you've seen in your packages for first and second interims. It only looks at the general fund. It looks at that budget status as of April 30th. It does not include, like you've typically seen, all your other funds, like the cafeteria fund or adult ed fund. So it doesn't have those financial reports, nor does it have a criteria and standards that you typically would see in those other reports. And at this point in time, the district's not required to submit a certification. What I'll note at the end of the presentation is the board is accepting the report. Not necessarily it's an approval, it's an acceptance of the report and review, which then goes to the County Office of Education for review, and then also for the California Department of Ed. So that's what's a little bit different with this report. And so, as I've shared in prior presentations, looking at the budget is always looking at various components, whether it's revenue assumptions, expenditure assumptions, on the most available information we have at hand. So we are still relying on what the governor had in his January proposal. I'll share here in a little bit what new assumptions have come up, or yet not final, and then other scenarios that we are planning for, or at least the county office or other agencies have suggested for us to have as a contingency, or what might come about in the future. But one of the key factors into our local control funding formula calculation is what we call the P2, as it relates to enrollment and average daily attendance. And as what I've shared over the course of the last year, each time we bring the interim report, we look at where are we? Where are we with our enrollment? How is our average daily attendance tracking? And if you recall, back during the budget revision in October, our estimate of our enrollment at that time, and we had already factored in a decrease of almost about 300 or so students from the prior year, our number of enrollment was 38,807. Then when we came to first interim, because then that relies on the data that we have available from the census day, which is basically the first Wednesday of October, which is also known as our CalPADS day. That number we brought to the board at first interim was 38,557. So as we closely monitor our enrollment on a weekly basis from that course of over those months, and then when we came to the board for second interim in March, we had a number of 38,139. So as you can see, over the course of the last few months, we've been incrementally decreasing that, and that already factored in that prior year change. So we as a district have been declining in enrollment. And so as you can see here, P2, which would have been traditionally that Friday right before the spring break, which would have been our cutoff for the data that we would submit to the county and then the CDE, which becomes the basis of our funding for next year. We're always a year in arrears to take credit for the prior year's enrollment in the subsequent year. So when the governor issued his executive order that I noted here at the bottom on March 13th, as a way to kind of help alleviate the stay-at-home orders and kind of just the COVID situation and drop of attendance, the governor pushed back that P2 requirement of March to February. So with that, that's where we ended at 38,096. Had we stayed with our traditional date, that number would have even been a little bit less. It would have been down by about 37. It would have been 38,059. So just a little bit of that number helped us maintain some of that revenue. So this becomes key in these revenue projections that I'll share for the next slide. A lot of our factors in the out years, for 2021 and 21-22, still are holding as where we were at with second interim. You see a significant decline. There are a lot of factors that we're monitoring. Chula Vista Elementary, as an example, and some of the items they have there with the middle school that just recently passed with their board. Also, we don't know. I mean, this is kind of where I'm going to start indicating some risks for the future. Is however the school does return to session, however platform, we don't know what that'll look like. We're using best guess estimates right now. Could that have an impact to enrollment? Perhaps. So that'll be critical because that impacts the funding then for also next year. Because remember, like I said, we're 1 year in arrears in terms of that basis for funding. But there's a lot of risk here and a lot of assumptions. And so as we take that information and start to build the calculation, and as I've previously shared and I've noted here, we did review this document with the County Office of Ed. We actually went through this detail and got their feedback on April 27th, and then even most recently, last week, went through this presentation with them as well in terms of the specifics. And so what you can see in green is what we are assuming as we're building the budget, these projections, the beauty of where we're at right now is we're aligning to these projections as we're building the budget for 2021. So we're starting to see how things are lining up. But as you can see with that enrollment difference and some of those factors, where we were at second interim to the third interim's number for next year, assuming what the governor had in his budget proposal back in January of 2.29% cost of living adjustment, that alone is about almost a $1.9 million reduction. So that we had to factor into our budget plan. And also these are the numbers that we've had to post for now as we're doing the budget from scratch, kind of building that up. So that number's in there. What has recently come up through School Services of California, they've indicated that the COLA might possibly be 2.31. But I want to caution the board and the public because the COLA is dependent on an implicit price deflator. It's a federal calculation by the U.S. Department of Commerce. It looks at like the first quarter of this year, and it kind of doesn't look back for a year. But as we move forward to the governor's approval of the budget in June, and then you'll see a potential change here in August, this number is more than likely going to change. I mean, given the environment, as all we've been watching the economics and the impact of COVID and what it has done to employment and other factors, and just even most recently, even as of last Thursday, we got new information from the state that the state is anticipating a shortfall of about $54 billion. That can translate to the district or to school districts of about $18 billion under Prop 98. So what the county had shared with us a few weeks ago is put an assumption. So I'm just sharing here for transparency purposes of the fact that what if the cost of living adjustment is 0%? When the budget's completed or come August or however many of us have experienced mid-year cuts, especially during the recession, could that be a possibility? If so, we could be looking at about almost $9 million in revenue loss just by that change of 2.29 to 0%. Other agencies such as FCMAT has even gone as far to say that the COLA might actually be a negative 10% COLA. If that's the case, that could be up to perhaps $60 million. It could range from on a per pupil basis, based on the information I provided on the last slide, it could be about $2,200 to $2,700, in that ballpark of what we could possibly lose in funding. Again, it's an unknown. The governor is going to provide an update this week, but from now until August and ongoing into this upcoming year, we're going to have to monitor this closely. What will it do in terms of our funding for schools? And certainly there's some areas that I'll highlight throughout the presentation for perhaps advocacy where possible. But I wanted to share that in relation to this slide here. The next few revenue assumptions, they've been pretty static, again, based on what the governor had shared. One of the key changes related to our lottery, that was about a $15,000 change because our ADA had gone down with our enrollment number going down, so we made that slight change. Everything else has been pretty static, so not too many changes there. As it relates to expenditures, the latest information that we have in terms of the STRS and PERS, there was a slight change regarding PERS, so we've incorporated that here. And I do have this noted later in the presentation, but I'll mention it now. Another risk that we need to monitor closely is what the investments will be, because both of these pension systems that we're part of rely significantly on stock market gains and things like that. Could there be a possibility that both of those pension systems might come back to the employers and make some changes, which would mean more of an impact to school districts? And could this be an area for advocacy as well? PERS is reviewed annually by their board, and they set these rates. And as you can see, there's been a continual uptick over the last few years as to where we're at with these numbers. STRS is unique because the governor did make commitment, to hold these numbers down just a little bit, about 1% in 1920 and 2021. But in 21-22 next year, because the STRS rates are set by statute by the state legislature. And so that will be revisited next year. So could, again, depending on the investment, all the actuarial analysis, could there be a potential change? There could. So what would that look like for the district? So there's those components there. Okay. One other assumption that changed since second interim that I want to highlight here relates to our special education, and this is the contribution. As a district, we maintain our student individualized education plans and the requirements set forth in each one. But we look at, and we've held the numbers in terms of the contributions since budget development through the second interim. It was about $62.5 million was the contribution from general fund to the special education program. What we evaluated, and also with COVID and with some substitute costs, and you'll see this here in another slide too on the general fund side of things, we did evaluate how our year-to-date trends have been. As I mentioned earlier, we had now activity through April. So we made an adjustment. It could possibly come in a little bit more favorable come June, but we took about $1 million adjustment. That doesn't mean our services have scaled back or any of that. That's just looking at where our actual costs are and evaluating that information. One thing to note, what's here at the bottom in red, and I'm not sure if that's been related in the past, is one thing under the federal laws, we do have a requirement as a district, which you'll hear us say the MOE, the maintenance of efforts, the federal maintenance of effort requirements. The district has to look at this number year after year. And so our basis going into 1920, it looks at our actuals, the local contribution and the actual contributions from the state and other factors. Is our number working with our local special education, local plan area known as the SELPA, and working with the director and their staff. We have $87.7 million the district is obligated to address. Now, we have to look at this annually, and just from a fiscal standpoint, be proactive. The federal law has some exemptions that you can account for to keep that baseline somewhat managed, because if not, it can escalate rather quickly. And working with our SELPA director, and he's indicated that no other South County district's doing this to the level we're doing it. We're evaluating, because we do have a window because of our early retirement plan that we took in 18-19. There's a couple of factors. You can look at staff who retired or voluntarily left the district, and then who replaced them. And you can look at the cost differential between those two, and you can make this adjustment to this amount. Another factor that the district can evaluate are students who have graduated the local education agency, the LEA. So that's one factor. We've seen who has left and the services that were provided. Such as an example, if you had a student that was with a non-public school, we can factor those amounts. So what I'm sharing this here is just there's a lot of nuances to the law specifically to that, but from a financial standpoint is our engagement and the proactiveness that we have done this past year to set up processes within our different departments, within HR, within finance, within the special services department. Really kind of ties back to the LCAP goal 4 of really putting these processes in place and monitoring these costs. And so, and like I said earlier, we've been very engaged with our SELPA director. We've had recent meetings with him even as of last week. So that's one factor. The other thing that I'd want to raise that I did indicate during our second interim meeting or presentation was, and again, it's a matter of timing, this budget projection and then what is also being put into the actual budget as we're building that is a $2 million contribution from the general fund into Fund 40, which is the special capital fund, because of the debt service, or in essence the loan for Elf Street property. At this point in time, Fund 40 does not have enough fund balance nor cash to assume this payment. This payment of $2 million is done in 2 installments. In September, $1.5 million, and in March, $500,000. So at this point in time, we've factored it into this year, you'll see it in our multi-year projections, and then when we come forward with the board, when we add the 22-23 year to our projections. What is contingent and what Dr. Geary has brought up in a recent board meeting is if the district has the 3rd Avenue property closed by September 1st, if we get a buyer, get it into escrow, close the transaction by September 1st, that property is estimated around 5.7 million less real estate transaction fees. So let's just say 5 million. If that goes into Fund 40, that will help then cover this $2 million cost for at least 2 years. So we'll be able to undo, let's say that reverse that general fund contribution. So that's our goal. I know that Dr. Geary's been working very closely with that. I know it just recently went out, I think, to market or to bid, and that'll be coming forward to the board in the upcoming weeks. But that's key. But at this point in time, as we look at our projections and as we look at our building the budget, we have to include that in there because it's an obligation that's coming due in September. And then when we build the cash flows, we're also going to reflect those cash outgoes during those months. The other thing, too, that we've got reflected here is routine restricted maintenance. And I know, Dr. Janney, I believe there's been conversations at the state level and possible flexibility of this item.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Salkeld. So I remember last year, a group of us went up, labor leaders and district office staff and 2 board members to talk with our legislators about this very issue. Because LCFF was fully funded as of last year, the state raised the routine restricted maintenance percentage from 2% to 3%. So this is 3% of restricted and unrestricted monies. So there's been conversation with at least Assemblywoman Dr. Weber's office and Lorena Gonzalez's office to take this forward, to consider that again going forward for all districts in the state of California, to bring it back to 2%. Bringing it back to 2% could save us, if you divide this by 3, about $5 million for next year. And every district in the state could benefit from that in these times. And so that has been shared with some of our legislators, but we could use some more advocacy on that from everyone.
Thank you. And so as then we shift from the expense assumptions, we go to the reserve assumption. So as you can see, as we were building our budget, we do have factored in the 2% economic uncertainty as that requirement for the ed code, and given some recent, letters from the county office regarding that component. And then the other items is a revolving cash, stores, inventory. Those are all placeholders of amounts that we have to have earmarked moving forward. In 2021, there is a unique obligation that's also due for the Qualified Zone Academy bond. That $5 million becomes due September 2021, so you have to have that money in reserves to demonstrate the payment piece of it, that obligation. And those were debts that were already in place for many, many years. I think date back to 2005 and 2010. So once taking those assumptions, and we take that information and we start to build and look at our interim financial. And what I'm going to share here in the next few slides is looking at 1920, because anything that we do in 1920 has a direct correlation or direct connection to 2021's projections. So when we looked at this year, specifically on the revenues, what I've noted here is that about $193,000 actual reduction. This is where I call the increases and decreases, or the puts and the takes on the revenue side of things. The significant reduction is as a result of us, again, looking at our revenues, primarily because now with our schools being closed, so from March to June, we don't have that level of activity of monies coming and all of that, flow of transactions. So we've had to make an adjustment. Looking at where we were at year to date, almost hitting $3 million number, and yet, we had a $4 million, projection. So we made an adjustment of $980,000, as you see there. Again, because we don't want to overstate our revenues. Now, could things change slightly as we close the books? Yes. We're working with our schools to close out anything that may have been left from the month of March. So we're working through that. So as that comes through in May and comes through in June, it might slightly change, but I don't think it's going to be that level of, volume. So we did make that adjustment. Now we had some positives because our interest income, what we had budgeted, and conservatively, it actually came in a little bit higher, so we recognized those amounts. We had about $135,000 come in from other state local revenues that we did not account for because we weren't accounting for those monies. It's a mandate that's outside of mandate block grant, so that was an inflow. We were able to record that. And then also now that we have our property taxes as of April, the County of San Diego provides a report called the J29, and we look at all of our tax rolls and all of our numbers, and there was a specific line there that we were able to capture that for 1920. So we balanced to that. Oops, sorry about that. So that's on the unrestricted side of things. Now on the restricted side, we had a couple of inflows since second interim. One specifically that I know we raised during the special board meeting in April was the State Senate Bill 117. Those proceeds were released, I want to say March 31st, April 1st timeframe, and they allocated $644,000 for the district. Those monies were earmarked for online distance learning or for sanitation expenditures and so forth. We earmarked the majority of that money. Less will factor in some indirects that are allowable based on the follow-up with the rep. And so those monies were earmarked for the computer purchase. We did have some other state revenues that came in the restricted. It was the California Partnership Academy grants. If they're not spent, these usually typically roll over. And then same thing with the MISTI grant, the Math and Science Teacher Initiative. There were some monies that came in there, so we reflected that. Now, transitioning from the revenues in 1920 to the expenditures of 1920, then we looked at, and we've been receiving a lot of inquiries from various parties, we looked at, okay, where are we right now, knowing that school is closed, are there some budget adjustments that are favorable that we can account for right now? So one item as an example is a certificated substitute cost. Because our teachers are in an online learning platform with their students, there's less of that likelihood for certificated substitutes. So we looked at, again, our actuals. We had our April payroll come through. We looked at what we had budgeted and took about $500,000 of that amount. Could possibly have a little bit more come June when we close the books for year end, but that seemed to be a reasonable amount given the trend. As also reached out to Dr. Geary and Ms. Sather regarding the transportation and the buses. With our buses not running and operating from March until June, were there some possible savings that we could account for in this budget year? So they've provided us a number of about $200,000 that they feel is reasonable for us to monitor at this point. And then we did have an uptick, as I mentioned earlier, it was unbudgeted for distance learning. Was the other half of the costs related to the student devices. But I'll share in another slide how we might be able to use some restricted funding sources coming in from the federal government and some flexibilities with Title I that might help relieve or kind of offset that number when we're closing the books. The other inquiry we received was regarding utilities because our schools have been closed. So that too, we reached out to Dr. Geary and Mr. Malone just to kind of see where are we with our utility bills, but at this point it's still too early because we're waiting to get those March and April utility bills so that we can make adjustments if needed. So we're looking to possibly incorporate any of that information as we prepare the estimated actuals with the budget. So we'll be evaluating that to make if that helps for this year. The other item here that we didn't have in the budget, and that kind of goes back to our conversations with the county office, and I know that Dr. Janney had shared this a while back, because the county had given school districts, I think it was like a 2-year period of a waiver. There was an agreement done in 2017 regarding a waiver of fees related to PeopleSoft. And I know that I think with Sweetwater we had a module that was not included, and so they refunded that. That went back into effect, so we had monies come out of our treasury account to cover this. They take this in 2 installments. And so in conversations with them, we said, if that's the case, we need to make sure we have this in the budget now and in our out years. This covers the cost of the payroll module and a portion of the HR module. So we've got that factored in. The original agreement with the county office dated back in 2013. That staff researched that. So that was the original MOU. that laid out the terms and conditions at that point in time. And then in 2017 is where they made the adjustments, but now it's been reinstated in its primary. And then, I was going to say, okay. And then the next item is just the restricted costs. Again, kind of where I shared earlier, money came in for $644,000, but now we've offset it with the student devices and indirects. There's a $644,000, so in and then out. And then I mentioned earlier the contributions reduction from special ed from the general fund. So when you take all of these items, the increases, decreases, then we aggregate that into our projections. And so what you see here, column B specifically, row 11, after we've looked at all of those revenue and expenditure and contribution adjustments, we're still looking at a negative fund balance of $3.5 million. It's a little bit less than where we're at second interim, but it's certainly still not positive, right? One thing I want to note, and again goes back to our dialogue with the county office, and goes back to the request to add $3 million to the district's budget here for salaries and payroll-related expenditures. We've been certainly monitoring that really closely and also looking at how our cash is coming in every month, or going out, I should say, in terms of payroll costs. So I did raise that to their attention last week in that dialogue, but we did not make any adjustments to that. But keep in mind, if that was not there, then we would almost be breaking even. But when you look at a projection, you take the current year data, and that's also factored into the 2021 projection. So in essence, that $3 million is in column B, and then also in column C. Which then at the end, translate to what's required at this point in time, about $32 million of required solutions or adjustments in order to balance the budget and ensure that these numbers are restored on here. So that's just something to note. We'll closely monitor as we prepare our estimated actuals through June, but most definitely when we get to September, we'll see how that translated and how we ended the year. Anything where this helps in a positive manner will help this beginning balance here, which then at the end helps, solve any other adjustment or shortfall in here. And we've been doing a lot of work with our principals, as an example, especially with second semester, looking at their schedules, looking at where they can make, adjustments where this is back in January. So anything we can do to save dollars today will help us going forward. And then this next slide is just taking that, those reporting periods side by side, seeing what changes occurred. One thing I just want to note here is from October budget revision on the revenue to our first interim. This here, just as a reminder, was primarily because when we worked with the county office, we had a very conservative average daily attendance percentage of 92% back in October. We did increase that percentage to 94 at first interim and have kept that steady over the next reporting cycles. We've given them data and evidence to support that. So that's why there was this change here between these two reporting cycles. The other key change that you see on the salary and benefits from this 276 to 292 was all the imposed budget adjustments that had been requested. And so that ended up, taking that fund balance, getting us to 5.3. And so we've just made some slight adjustments, tracking that over the last reporting cycle. And so now we're at 3.5 for general fund for the year. Just to also note, as we close the books for 1920, we're working closely with Dr. Aguirre and Mr. Span, just kind of looking at where with cafeteria. I know that they've certainly expanded the amount of meals they've been able to provide to the community. So we're looking at what that might entail when we close the books, and if there'll be a contribution required at all. We're trying to make sure that it stays a sustainable program. Will there be more COVID-related expenditures as it relates to personal protective equipment and other online or distance learning requirements? So things to just keep a note of. And then too, as I mentioned earlier, what will be in the governor's May revision, and then in June, and then subsequent to that. So this next slide here there's been a lot of conversation at the federal level under the CARES Act. What we do know is what was included on that item are two funding streams. It's the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund of about $2.9 billion. At this point, we have not received specifics in regards to that allocation. What we have received some preliminary information relates to this other funding stream, the Elementary and Secondary School Relief Fund of $13.2 billion. How that is being determined is based on Title I allocations. So all of those variables that go into determining that. And we had an outside party, so we have not at this point received any official communication from the California Department of Education. They're the ones that give us our final numbers and apportionments. But we have had School Services of California do a preliminary estimate that has indicated that Sweetwater would get about $8.3 million. So with that being said, a lot of the guidance that's coming our way and what we're seeing is this is starting to look obviously a lot like restricted title monies with the specific intent, the specific language. So I just want to make sure and kind of share that for all parties that this isn't money that's going to come in and help shore up the general fund unrestricted that I just shared on the prior slide. This is going to come in with restrictions, and it's already been noted it can only be spent on these particular items, online learning, sanitation supplies, and so forth, as noted here. Even as of last week, we received guidance from the U.S. Department of Ed that indicated that also our non-public schools are entitled a percentage as under equitable services of monies that they will get. They typically, just like we do with Title I and Title II, it's based on their enrollment and a few other factors that determine that. So again, we're getting as more guidance comes our way, we'll be able to evaluate, how we can utilize those dollars in the best way possible. I know that Dr. Janney and her colleagues, and I believe the board had taken some action prior to, because where the funds are right now, states are keeping 10%, or the CDE is keeping 10% of those monies. As school districts, we're only seeing 90% of that. So there's certainly some area there of potential advocacy. And I think Dr. Janney, right, that's been addressed, I think, previously to ensure that districts get some of that money.
Yeah, the board approved a resolution at the last board meeting that went forward, as well as a letter that President Tarantino sent to the governor.
So that'll help in that area if we can get those monies. And so then the next few slides are, again, kind of indicating what I've just shared about like that uncertainty, right? We're building a budget with best information we have available, unknown with all of these moving pieces. It's a very fluid, I heard earlier, unprecedented, scenario. The State Department of Finance in March issued a memo indicating that they would be preparing the governor's budget based on what's known as a workload budget, kind of bare minimum. All the proposals and investments that the governor had indicated in January have pretty much been tabled because they're not going to be vetted. They're not going to have that opportunity to go through the Assembly budget subcommittees. So that's been kind of, in essence, been put on hold. The only indication that the Assembly has signaled where they will put additions into the 2021 budget relates specifically to COVID-19, wildfire prevention, and homelessness funding. So those have been at least messaged in that regard. And then with that being said, one key factor that the State Department of Finance relies on, just like we rely on certain variables to build our budget, with the postponement of the income tax filings, they rely a lot on that April 15th and what comes in as inflows when they're building the May revised budget. With that being pushed to July 15th, the Department of Finance doesn't have that basis to get a good handle of what that looks like. So that's why we've received early projections that there might be a $54 billion shortfall. And so this will trigger all of this additional review come the summer, and the Assembly will revisit the state budget come August. So will we see some changes in August? More than likely, yes. And so what will that entail for the budget? And then these are the items I touched upon, the first quarter, the COLA based on the U.S. Department of Commerce. I touched upon the pension contributions where that might be a risk. Where there is a possible silver lining in all of this is, and the vision that Governor Brown had at the time related to the rainy day fund. Currently, under that savings account, I guess if you will, there is about $16.5 billion in that account. In order to draw upon that, the governor does have to issue a fiscal emergency declaration in order for those funds to be released. But as I understand it right now, he can only release 50% of that. So when I mentioned earlier on that about $18 billion might be what schools, K-12, might be impacted by with the shortfall at the state level, you know, you could shore up some of that by utilizing this rainy day fund. Is there possible legislation or things that could change so that it can be used in its entirety? Possibly. But as I understand it right now, they would only be able to use 50%. So at least that's a positive in this uncertain time right now that could possibly help. Things that we're doing now and have been doing to kind of mitigate some of that financial risk as we continue to look at our positions. I mean, we've been doing this now for some time with our position control committee, looking at, vacancies and looking at, kind of holding and looking at a review of all of our non-critical positions that might be able to, be postponed for a little bit. The other piece of it is with so much legislation or waivers that were being introduced over the last few weeks and months since March, very fluid again, but there's a lot of opportunities that we may have with federal dollars, particularly Title I, Title II, and Title IV, that has been earmarked for purposes of technology and infrastructure. If we have any remaining balances, we could use that carryover for that purpose. One thing that we were monitoring very closely was the fact, because the district did use the waiver, there's only an option where you can use this carryover waiver that exceeds 15% once every 3 years. The district utilized that back in 2017-18. So the waivers did allow for that. If you did that, no matter what, that provision, you'd be able to submit for that. And you do that process through the consolidated application on an annual basis. So we'll have that as an opportunity to reevaluate for funding purposes. I've mentioned CARES Act. I've mentioned the Senate Bill 117. And so we also, back in the special board meeting in April, the board did approve us going out to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration, to go through and ask for a grant for possible reimbursement of our costs. We have been in contact with the representative there now on several occasions over the last few weeks. What the rep has indicated to us is that we have to ensure that all of these funding items here have to be exhausted before we can submit anything related to FEMA. So, obviously is aware of the CARES Act, so we have to ensure that these dollars are spent. One recent communication that came up with CARES Act, but again, I haven't received it official, but it appears that those monies will be to be used through September of 2022. It'll go from March of 2020 through September 30th of 2022. It looks a lot like the ARA monies that we received back in 2009 around the Great Recession. So it'll give us multi-years to use those funds. But we'll not be able to submit a claim until these items are exhausted, but we do have it in queue. We have it out there. The other item I touched upon earlier on was, again, just the LCAP, how all those deliverables have been deferred to December. The only thing, too, that is most recent is last week, and the Dr. Alvarez's team will be helping put that together, is a report. There's a template that's focusing specifically on the school district's response to school closures related to COVID. It's a template that covers a couple of areas that will need to be brought forward to the board next month. So we'll be working on that piece. Okay. This here's just a snapshot of the restricted funding sources. So again, kind of balancing that out. And then from here, now we shift to, ensuring that we have a balanced budget. And what we had shared with the board back in second interim, our phase one kind of our recovery plan. There's been things that we have been continuing to monitor. Any vacancies, and with our work with CSCA as an example, there was the office assistant one position that came about in the most recent months. From the time that we brought second interim, there was an additional position. We were able to factor that in. That's been included. That's been also factored into our budget plan as we've been building that. There's a few things that new grant funding sources that have come in from the CTIG, the K-12 Strong Workforce as an example. It allows for some positions to relieve it, again, temporarily for at least next year, for 2021, unless the grant continues, but at least for next year, it did help relieve some funding within general fund that we're able to capture that. The other thing that I've noted on here, as the board's aware, with our implementation of the new business system, the accounting and business system, that's going to integrate with the HR module in 4. We've been looking for now some months. We've been reconciling Fund 35, which is our state school facilities fund, and carving out where there's been interest earnings, where there's been savings from just projects in general. And we've been having conversations with one of the audit supervisors, just even most recently at the Office of Public School Construction. And he's given us some guidance on some funding sources. So we'll be bringing forward that to the board here in the upcoming weeks. We'll be able to shift that to a restricted funding source and utilize that. And that'll help free up dollars for 2021. This 1.1 is currently already factored into the IT budget plan. And we can reclass that given the guidance we received from OPSE. So there's some areas there. I'm not sure if Dr. Janney, if you want to touch upon that, but I know there's been conversations about, we have a resolution on the PKS, so we'll be touching upon that in a little bit. And then from cash flow standpoint, so when we're looking at the budget, is one aspect of it. Those are the operating, the inflows from revenues and expenditures. What cash, as we transition to this area, is it's all about the timing. When do those obligations, when do they materialize? And as you can see here, there are times, because our receipts from the state, as an example, aren't enough to cover our payroll or even our vendor obligations. So what we have here on this left side is the remaining balance that we had that carried forward from 2017-18, where we had a little over $30 million of the monies that were due, that had been borrowed from general fund, from the CFD fund, known as the Fund 49. So we were able to chip away with a lot of things that we put in place last year. We ended the year at $12 million. We built our projections for cash with the indication that this would be paid for. We did have some adjustments working with our external auditors where we had to look back about a 5-year period to restate some interest. But I am happy to report, again, a silver lining to a lot of what I've shared previously, but at least from a cash standpoint, this obligation is paid for. So Fund 49 has been paid in full. As you can see here on April 20th, we made that last payment. So that's paid for. Fund 35, again, just to kind of show that, again, that timing we had to borrow in December because of when the property tax receipts came in, our apportionment, and then our payroll time frame. We had to borrow, but we quickly repaid it back. So that's been paid for, back actually in January. And then as we've shifted away this past year from borrowing internally, according to the Ed Code as noted there on this slide, we shifted working with the County of San Diego Treasurer via the County Office of Ed, where we have basically, through the board's resolution, we'll be bringing that to the board in June, we basically asked for an advance on the property taxes that are paid throughout the year. And so with that, as you can see, most of that borrowing happens in July and August because those are the months where we don't receive as much from the state in the apportionments. So that helps us ensure that we keep our obligations met from a cash standpoint. And then you start to see some repayment. So what happens is they intercept, in essence, those property taxes. We get supplemental taxes and so forth throughout the year outside of the traditional period of December and April. So as you can see, like in December, they took about $28 million. And then in April, they had 2 different payments. On the 10th, they took about $18 million, and then they took the balance on the 27th. So as of April, again, this cutoff for the financials for the third interim, that's also been paid for. So I am happy to report that at this point in time, we do not owe any of these outside agencies or our internal funds in accordance to the Ed Code. So that's a good thing. It's a very good thing. Now, we're certainly going to monitor that cash flow from now until June and kind of monitor that, but we will be bringing forward that to the board, like I said, in June. For that resolution, we have been keeping the county office apprised, so that way the county treasurer can plan for that again next year, because as a district, we're still not in that position just yet to go to the financial market to seek a TRANS, which is a tax revenue anticipation note, to seek that. The overall interest paid here to the county, and it's on one of our prior slides, it was about between $610,000 and $620,000. So that was the interest cost for that loan, in essence. Okay. So in terms of next steps, as I mentioned, kind of this is what our look ahead is. The governor releases the May revise. We'll look again to see where we're kind of going into our next phase, what else needs to be accounted for. Where we're at with the district budget come June, and then that borrowing resolution that I mentioned will be brought forward to the board. So what we're asking for in the packet that you have is accept the third interim report so that we can submit it to the county office in accordance with education code. So if there are any questions.
Did you want to take the public comment, Mr. Tarantino?
No, what I was going to say before I forgot to unmute myself was before we go ahead and take public comment, I was going to ask Dr. Scavarna if he had any insights or comments about the presentation. Okay, we will go ahead and move to public comments.
I have one speaker. The comments are from Nick Marinovich. Greetings again. I would like to compliment the CFO and her staff for preparing a report that outlines the issues and numbers in this turbulent time. I know a lot of work went into this report. Also, there is positive news on page 28 indicating reduced Melrose borrowing. Begs the question why you did not borrow earlier from the county treasury under prior CFOs. There are suspicions. No big secret, you are in trouble, and it has gone from really bad to it is going to get way worse. Big Matt said it best in their April 2020 fiscal alert for preparing fiscal year 2021 budget scenarios. History clearly tells us that the cause of most LEA insolvencies can be traced to a bad financial decision made during prosperous times that came back to haunt the district during lean financial times. My comments are as follows. The crux of the potential fiscal insolvency is a payroll problem. There are too many people at too high a salary given available revenue. You gave salary increases that were unsustainable, and the risk of labor contracts were not adequately analyzed and presented to your board or public. Furthermore, you did not ask enough probing questions. It is not the union's fault for asking for raises. It is your fault for saying yes. The rubber meets the road on page 26. Despite the bureaucratic fogging with the terminology, I believe this is certificated salary and benefit reductions. At the average salary and benefit levels for all full-time employees, this reduction translates to about 200 employees. With respect to fiscal uncertainties outlined in page 20, it is highly unlikely the state will bail out locals. The May 7, 2020 fiscal update from the State Department of Finance estimates state budget reserves of $21 billion for fiscal year 2021. However, for this and next fiscal year, the state is projecting a $41.9 billion general fund decline from the January budget projections. This fiscal update concludes, under Prop 98's constitutional calculation, this revenue decline results in a lower required funding level by $18.3 billion general fund for K-12 schools and community colleges. My comments are too numerous to fit into 500 words, and a separate memo will follow. However, in Cliff Note form, page 16, negative beginning fund balance for this and next fiscal year is symbolic of our dire straits. Page 17, the adopted budget had a $10.2 million positive fund balance, and the third interim has a $3.5 negative balance. Page 21, retirement contributions could get worse due to stock market uncertainties and overall economic recession, or worse yet, depression. There is only one way out of this without laying off significant people and disrupting service to the students. There must be an across-the-board salary reduction that can vary by level of salary with lower percentages for lower paid staff. It is so sad. The blame is on the dais. There are no further comments.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And we will now go to the polls. And the polls on K2 were from Mrs. Hall and myself. So Mrs. Hall, would you like to go last on this one as well, or would you
Sure.
me to go
That's fine.
first? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sachel, for the presentation. Very
Is
in-depth.
now exiting.
Very in-depth as usual. I do have some questions in terms of what was on the presentation. On slide, I don't know what the slide number is, but anyway, on the slide that says changes from second to third interim reporting periods.
This one?
No, it's
15.
it's slide 15. Okay.
President Tarantino.
Unknown
this
participant is now joining.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah,
Dr.
Mark, it muted. I had when you asked the question to me, it was muted. I couldn't talk, so that's why you didn't get a response.
Okay. All right.
The presentation was fine, and I'll try to listen. I'm listening, but the thing has a tendency to mute me off. So I'll try to stay on top of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. On slide 15, the PeopleSoft fees agreement with San Diego County Office of Education. So I think there was a perception. I know that when we were talking about our movement away from PeopleSoft, that the board was hit pretty hard by members of the public as to why would we turn our back on a program that was free. And at the time, it was mentioned that it was only going to be free for a certain amount of time, but yet that didn't resonate with the public. And so now the fees are back, $128,000 per year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we use PeopleSoft for payroll and some HR services. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And will we, when we fully implement the Infor system, would we still be required to keep PeopleSoft for those two areas?
Yes, because under the fiscal accountability piece, that is a requirement for all districts that are online with the county. So that is a requirement for us to maintain that. So that'll be consistent going forward.
Okay, and is there, and I don't remember, you said the original MOU, Dr. Sachel, was signed in 2013, and none of us were here, so I don't know exactly what it said, but is there an escalator clause in the fees that have to be paid each year to the San Diego County Office of Education for the use of PeopleSoft?
The agreement, in reviewing the agreement, there's a section that does say annual maintenance and support fees, and it refers to starting in 13-14, the fee schedule would be based on looking at enrollment, I believe. There's a couple of factors here, average daily attendance. There's a fee based on average daily attendance. And then that schedule is published on their website.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I also have a question on the general fund unrestricted budget projections, that $3 million that's imposed on payroll expenditures. Yes. Could you? I know that you've done this before, and it's not. I'm not saying that you haven't done a good job on explaining it, but I just don't get it. So can you maybe go over it again?
Sure. So again, back in first interim, one of the county's requests at that time was to add, in essence, a placeholder, looking at that trend for payroll So we had to increase the budgeted costs in this line item here as it relates to payroll costs. But so when we factor that in here, so this 329 million, when you're building a projection for the next year, that number, so where that compounding factor comes in, it's also included in 2021. It continues as if it's ongoing.
Okay.
But if we're saying we don't need that 3 million in here in 1920, so you have savings of 3 million, that this number up here goes away, and so does the 3 million that you have in this line item. So that's where that 6 million comes about.
Okay.
Because you're saving in the current year, and then you're saving in the next year.
Okay. And do we have any indication as to when we can delete that $3 million from an expenditure point of view? You mentioned something about September. Is
Right.
that when the books are finally closed, correct?
When the books are finally closed, because now we're looking at the budget doesn't come a factor, because now you're looking at what actually came in your revenues and what went out in your expenditures. So if our payroll expenditures end up coming in lower, as how we've been trending that, then that number would certainly not be 3.5. So that's our, at that point in time, that opportunity to evaluate how things materialize during the year, and can demonstrate whether or not that was necessary or not.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say then, without you saying it actually, is that we're going to have to continue with that $3 million imposed budget on payroll expenditures in the formation of our next budget, correct? The new budget that's coming up in the 2020-2021 budget?
What I've requested,
because we won't be able to get from under this until September, and we have to approve a budget by the end of June.
Right, and what I've shared with the county office during last week's meeting as an example is that the 3.5, that 3 million will remain in our what's known as estimated actuals. It's just another version of the
Okay.
So that'll be in there for June. What I've asked for 2021, because we are building the budget again from scratch, looking at positions. I mean, we walked through, the Director of Fiscal Services and I walked through with the county reps, showing them an allocation summary, showing them a staffing worksheet, how that information is then tying to the general ledger for the budget. So I asked that question. There's evidence here to show the level of granularity of what we've done to layer another $3 million buffer when we're actually building the budget with evidence to support that, is where I came in and saying, would that be necessary? So those are going to be dialogues we're going to have with them. We've got meetings that are scheduled here over the next few weeks as they review our budget for 2021. Yeah.
And then my last question is, why wasn't there any kind of information on the adult ed budget in this third interim report?
Because third interim only looks at general funds. So all those other funds, Fund 11 for adult ed, Fund 13 for cafeteria, that's not required under this provision with the third interim. It only looks at general funds specifically.
Okay.
We will be bringing to the board that in June.
Correct. With when we review the entire budget. And I wanted to tell you that slide 28, it made my heart jump. Thank you very much for all of the hard work and all of the creative thinking and going outside in terms of looking at other ways that we could, number one, stop borrowing from Fund 49, and then also looking for other ways that we can meet our obligations without having to borrow from Fund 49. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. Mrs. Hall.
Thank you, President Tarantino. And I echo Dr. Sakeld, I echo President Tarantino's sentiment. It is really nice to see what a qualified fiscal leader can do when given the right tools or the right, authority. And I appreciate that you and your team have done such a lot of work, especially the borrowings and repayments. I just wanted to ask one question because I wasn't sure I had it. when you talked about the interest that was paid for the borrowing, was that all that 620K more or less, was that for the county treasury borrowing, or was that a combination of what we owed, the adjustment owed to the Mello-Roos, or what was that?
So no, so just for the county, so I'm on this expense assumption slide, so you see the interest to the county treasury is 621. That's what we have in the budget. It came in
Okay,
a
I
little less.
missed it because I think the slide you were on was a different one, and that's where I made my question note. So
you had that's that one, and then 189,000. So it's still on this slide. That's why you can see zero in the next subsequent years. We have 189,000 for what was left of that 12 million. And then we had the 1.2, which was the prior year restatements that we were working on.
That's where you had to increase the interest to adjust for a prior year that it was understated, correct?
Correct. That's what we had to restate from a prior year.
Yeah.
For
yes,
this
I get. Okay. Great. Yes. I see that. So that was the slide I was looking at when I made the note of what you said. So starting back on the enrollment and the ADA slide, sorry if I'm making noise with my papers, but the P2 is what you reported at the end of February, but it looks like the numbers for the ADA didn't change from what you had in the second interim. Because
the ADA, this funded ADA, relies on the numbers from the prior year. So in our calculator, we have the changes. It's this number here. So these numbers changed.
So at the end of February, would you have known did you adjust? Because you did make adjustments to the 2020,
correct,
21 year and the 2022 year. You lowered those estimates because of what you knew this February for ADA, or because you just factored a percentage?
No, it's what we knew. So what we have in these factors here, because this, again, remember we're getting paid 1 year based on the prior year data. So this was pretty much static, right? Because it's
right.
2019 stated. But yes, these numbers here changed since we knew what P2 was. And that's what triggered that decline here of these monies.
So it's not it is actual ADA numbers that you confirmed it in February.
Based on the P2 process, looks at enrollment and average daily attendance. So yes, it locks in those numbers. And that's what we reviewed with the county office when that ties into the calculator.
And the only thing that we really probably are looking at in a change on the 2021 projection is really the COLA, probably being zero. I mean, I think that's going to be a real, not even a guess. I would say that they're not going to be giving us a COLA for sure. That's what happened in the recession. COLAs were zeroed out. It typically is what happens. It's my understanding, which would mean a difference of the 1.85 or the 8.7.
8.7.
Actually, the 8.7 right off the bat. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't include the drop. That doesn't even touch the drop in Prop 98 guarantee, correct? That's aside from that.
That could be, yes. I mean, the COLA is a factor in the overall requirement, but yeah.
Okay. So if in fact it is a 20 or a 22% cut to education, K-12 education in the Prop 98 guarantee, how much is that to our district based on your projections?
I mean, that's gonna be around that 2,200 to 2,700 per student. I mean, just looking at this number here, and that's about a 2% difference. It's going to be in the 2,000 range or more per student.
Is that ADA for the enrollment?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Is that so? You would budget based on enrollment, but you earn it based on ADA, is that correct?
We earn it based on ADA. There is a lot of discussion right now at the state whether or not for next year as a way to help mitigate, do we get funded on enrollment or do we get funded on ADA? I mean, that's still to kind of see how that gets plays out. But we as a district get funded on ADA, average daily attendance.
Okay. So we'll know more after Thursday, I suppose, on that one, huh?
And yes, that'll be a preview with May Revised, but
is the KID reserve, is that in a bank from the Fund 01?
What's in Fund 01? This is Fund 01. This is the general fund unrestricted.
The Q's $5 million that is going to be paid out, I believe, next year. Is it next year?
Next year. It's going to be paid actually in September 2021, and it is under the general fund. It's an installment that'll be paid, and so that's why we have it in the reserve.
So it's part of the general fund. Is it in the county fund, in Fund 01?
It's in the district's Fund 01. It's the responsibility of the general fund unrestricted.
So, because I mean, I was told it was in a different bank account, so that's why I question why, if it's in Fund 01 at the county, we're just where it belongs. I mean, we're going to have to pay it. There's no doubt. You've recognized in this. Then I just wanted to know.
Yeah, there is. It's not an.
Was there a misconception? Maybe somebody. I can't hear you, right?
The cash is sitting in there's a bank account with a trustee, but it is an obligation that the bank account, it's not within the county treasury, it's with a trustee that holds that money. And then when we get to September 2021, that trustee will release those dollars to the payer, or to the lender of the money.
So you recognize it in the general fund accounting, but it is really in a separate resource or a fund, bank account, whatever you want to call it. I get it.
Now, when you look
at
it,
thanks. That clarifies it for me. What else? So the 2200 to 2700, you would take that and multiply the enrollment to figure out in total what kind of drop that would be to our funding for next year if that happens.
And that's just a back of the envelope. I mean, that's kind of an estimate number as to what that could look like. I think after this week, we'll have a better sense of what that could look like for ADA, but that's if it's that worst case scenario, if it does go down. You know what?
So it's like 80 million.
Oh, it could be as far as based on what FCMAT has shared and others. I mean, this could be as far as perhaps 60 million. I mean, if it goes down to a negative 10% COLA, as FCMAT has indicated, that could be about 60 million.
No, I'm not talking about the COLA. I'm talking about on top of the COLA, actually being reduced in our revenue for the year in the base Prop 98 guarantee.
It could. Again, these are variables that go into that LCFF and that overall obligation under Prop 98. So it could be possible. There are a lot of moving pieces to what that funding will look like.
So at this point in time, the $8 million that is identified by the federal, that school services estimated for CARES Act revenue to our district, which is specific to certain things. It's not like an open-ended, unrestricted pot of money. That $8 million, also besides this taking off certain percents, the county also takes a little bit off of that as well, don't they?
Title I monies is typically the
for
state.
For their oversight services.
If it's anything like our Title I, county typically takes a bit.
Yeah. Anyway, the $8 million, also besides this taking off certain percents, the county also takes a little bit off of that as well, don't they? For their oversight services. If it's anything like our Title I, county typically takes a bit. Yeah. Anyway, That's only 8 million. If the governor comes up with, out of his 16 billion, another 8 million for education, it certainly won't likely, once it's spread out across everything, really help with a lot of our loss of revenue, and especially when we're already looking at not having a reserve, because I know that a lot of places do have a reserve and they're looking at some dire things happening in the fall. Most districts are talking about what the fall is going to be really hard to face because of what's happening. I think it's really hard to see where we're going to be able to stay on course at all. But I had another question. Let me find my tab. You do have the COVID dollars. You have the SERP obligation budgeted where in this display is the SERP? Is that within just your general projections?
Yes, it's within this 329,000, but you have on the copy of the SACS report, I think it's object code 3901 or 3902, has the $3.8 million of the annuity payment for the retirement plan. So that's in the budget.
Thank you.
And it's factored into our multi-years.
And the other part of it is that the adult ed isn't showing on this display at all because we're not contributing to that fund anymore either. It's not showing as a contribution on that contribution slide.
No, from a contribution, no. At this point, the fund has been sustainable. Given last year and some changes, we're not factoring a contribution.
I don't know what's going on, but it's really hard to hear you. Some kind of static and yeah. So let me. All right. Because I can't really hear, there's a lot of interference. I'm just going to let this. I'm going to thank you. I want to thank your team because they are doing a lot. This time of year is always heavy. But I have to say, I'm not really in agreement with, and it's not because of anything you've done yourself. And it's the budget solutions for next year that I have real issue with. So I don't believe that I know enough about what's going on here to be able to approve this. If that means by giving an approval on this third interim, it's accepting all these budget solutions as being the way we're going. The map, and that is the map set in stone, because on a lot of this, we don't even have a real picture of what's going on there in full. We've never been told it. We've never been, we've never been given that opportunity to weigh in on all these reductions in a way that everybody has seen it in a public meeting. And that is not on you, Dr. Sawkeld, but I certainly am, I'm voting for something to give the district flexibility and options to notice people in March, meeting a March 15th deadline, as the majority of the board approved. I don't believe was necessarily an approval on this is the mapped out obligations to reduce in these areas, because I don't think it's very balanced in many ways. So in that respect, I appreciate your time, and that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hall. If there are no other questions or.
Frank, I have a question.
Sure. Mr. Segura.
Yeah, go back to page or slide 16, please. Just want to ask a question.
On my end, because I've got the slide number covered. What's the header on that one? Slide 16?
One more, that's it. The general fund unrestricted, yeah. So I'm just could you please explain like the line item number 8? In 1920, there's nothing, but in 2021, there's 32.5 million. Is that where the projected or where the, I guess, anticipated or proposed layoff, that's included in there? That's that number?
Correct. So we've got about 20-some million dollars with the particular kinds of services is factored into this 32 million. So with
okay, that's what I thought. Just want to make sure I was right. And then you said the 3 million that the county is asking us to account for in 1920 and 2021. What is it, 3 million again that they're asking? Why is that?
They imposed on payroll entries back in first interim. There was a request to add additional costs there. And so if given where we're seeing, where the trend is going, if that ends up being favorable by the end of the year, then in essence, this could have been overstated by that amount.
So they were saying that we needed to put 3 million plus because they thought our costs were higher than what we think they are, or what they're correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's all the questions I have, and thank you for the presentation to you and your team.
President Tarantino?
Yes, Paula.
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I did have one question. I was confused on the page where you had the budget solutions, and you're talking through all these different things. And I know I asked for the detail to be provided, the detail on this, and you didn't have, I'm sure, enough time to turn around and get that to me before tonight. But on the implementation, you're just saying that you think, because this looks like these are all cost savings that you've outlined, but you really have no guarantee that you're going to be able to do that switch over to Fund 35, do you?
Oh,
I mean, hasn't the county been challenging that all along?
I believe so, because like I said, we've been having conversations with the OPSC rep, and I mentioned to the county last week that we've been having this dialogue, and I'll have something in writing from the OPSC rep that will indicate an additional options for funding. So we've already posted this amount in our actual ledger, but I'll be able to work with the team and remove that and put it to another fund, given the guidance that we received from OPSC. And I'll definitely keep the county apprised of that. So I know Dr. Scavarna's on. Like I said, I kept the county office, even as of last week, apprised of that conversation.
Yes.
So I hope.
Well, I hope you keep the board apprised as well.
Well, no, definitely. Of course, that's what I'm sharing with the board. But yeah, definitely, that's what I mentioned. If that's definitely something we can incorporate by Friday, because we need to start finalizing the details, then that would come forward to the board in an upcoming construction in progress report known as the M1. And that would have that funding change. Because over a year ago, the board took action to earmark some of those budget dollars under Fund 35. If we need to switch it to another fund that's permissible, under the provisions of what OPSC has provided, we will share that with the board.
So you can use Fund 35 to pay off to go to the L Street, right? Or
Not
you could.
35. No, Fund 35 cannot be used for L Street.
Okay.
Any proceeds that from so the sale of Third Avenue, those proceeds have to go into Fund 40.
Right. Fund 40. I didn't mean Fund 40. Which fund do they go into?
Fund 40. And that is where the principal and interest payment or the debt service is paid for L Street. So that sale of Third will help cover the debt for L Street for at least 2 years.
Thank you.
President Tarantino, if I may?
Yes. Mr. Solis.
Thank you. Just wanted to also say thank you to Dr. Salkeld and the team for their hard work. And one comment that I did, and also wanted to thank those communities that pay into the Mello-Roos for helping us out when we were struggling, and glad we got them all paid back, and hopefully we continue not having to dip into that. But the comment that was made with regards to using the county treasury, why didn't we do that before?
Typically, the policy that the county treasury has is that they would like districts to go through the financial market first. So it's a contingency plan to go through the county of San Diego, only if you can't go out to market and get your own loan. And because Sweetwater is in that position with some pending reports, we cannot go at this point because there are a lot of disclosure documents and a lot of things that we have to entail given these pending reports. We cannot go to the financial market. So the expectation is to continue, if anything, one more year with the county treasury, but let's say by 21, 22, that we then at that point start exploring going to the financial market. It's only temporary. It's not ongoing. And it is cost effective because they charge the rate within the county pool, similar to what was done with borrowing internally.
Wonderful, thank you. And I also want to take the time to thank our County Office of Education for working with you guys to make this possible. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to accept the fiscal year 2019-2020 third interim financial report.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Solis, seconded by Pike. Madam Clerk, will you please call for the vote?
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura. Mr. Segura,
Sorry about that. No.
Tarantino,
Yes.
Paul,
No, I'm voting no because I don't agree with the solutions. Thank you.
motion passes 3 yes, 2 no.
Okay, it's almost 8 o'clock, and we usually take a break after we've been going at it for about 2 hours. So why don't we take about a 10-minute break, okay?
If everyone could
Alrighty.
please remember to mute yourselves and turn off your
Okay.
video You're okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene the meeting, and we will go ahead and begin with F3. It was pulled by the public and also staff and Mrs. Hall. So I don't know that we've ever had F3 ever pulled by the public. So are there any speakers to that, Madam
Yes,
Clerk?
I have one speaker.
Okay.
These comments are from Nick Marinovich.
Okay.
This item with its blank space is symbolic of the void in leadership. Leadership that is needed if this district is to move forward and gain the trust and confidence of its staff, public, and like it or not, the County Office of Education. There is no joint meeting with the CBOC listed. Within that overall observation, I would like to drill down on the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and the lack of a recent joint meeting with your board. The last joint meeting was held on October 17th, 2017. The CBOC policy and regulations, aka bylaws, state we are to meet twice a year, once in May and October. These are the very regulations you also cite on why we cannot interview and hear from the Project Labor Agreement Coordinator funded by bond proceeds. I guess you want, quote, selective, following the rules and ignoring what is mandated by law. You are supposed to have real oversight by state law. The district is kind of acting like the President of the United States. You are sending a message. We don't care about oversight. The time spent by these volunteers does not matter, and CBOC, you are now marginalized. Bond oversight has regressed significantly the past 2 years. The state of the bond oversight is worse than during the corruption era of Jesus Gondara and Ed Brandt. I can only hope that as you move forward, or perhaps you will not even be there if you read the financial tea leaves, that you rectify the situation. This saddens me to be so negative, but it is very discouraging to leave this committee with less respect than when I started. I'm available to any and all of you to discuss and move forward now in a positive manner. You have my commitment. It is not too late. The ball is in your court. There are no further speakers.
Okay. So, Mrs. Hall, do you want to go first, or should we hear from other people first?
I'm willing to let other people go first.
Okay, so you want to be last on all of the polls
What?
as well?
I don't care. Whatever you call. I just wanted to vote last. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and go first then. I would like to congratulate Dr. Ryan Burke, who was named the Adult Education Administrator of the Year by AXA Region 18. He was at a dinner that was to be held in April, but because of the stay-in-place order, the moved to October, and he and other administrators selected by the AXA Association and also the San Diego County School Boards Association, that dinner will be held in October, and he will be honored at that time. Thanks, Dr. Janney, for calling out the Greater San Diego Science and Engineering Fair award winners. There was also a number of our ASB presidents that were honored for their time and effort at the 63rd Annual Washington Lincoln Laurels for Leaders Luncheon, which was held at San Diego State University. And those ASB presidents from our district that were honored are Carlos Torres from Bonita Vista High School, Alaya Navarro from Castle Park High School, Brenna Rico from Chula Vista High School, our own past student board representative, Brenna Pangilian from East Lake High School, Alexis Samaniego from Hilltop High School, Melanie Coronado from Mar Vista High School, Rosas from Montgomery High School, Jasmari Aquino from Olympian High, Manuel Martinez from Otay Ranch High, Elvia Pedraza from Palomar High, Christian Fuentes Hernandez from San Ysidro High, and let's see, who else? Jacob Ayala from Southwest High, and Ella Sarposa from Sweetwater High School. They not only got this recognition, but also a certificate and a $250 check. So congratulations to all of the awardees from our district. Well done. Okay, how about Mr. Pike? Would you like to go next?
Sure. First, I'd like to thank again Dr. Salkeld and all our staff. That was an excellent report, and I'm in agreement with. I'd like to see those paid in red signs. Thank you very much for that. And then I wanted to thank all the district staff for continuing to pass out the food to the many people that need it, especially in our district, and for taking their time and effort, and they're being very generous with their time and helping out. So I just wanted to let them know that I appreciate it. And that's all I have, President. Thank you.
Okay, Vice President Segura.
Thank you, President Tarantino. I had a CSBA, our virtual meeting on Monday. We had the lobbyist for the CSBA on the line, on the call, on the Zoom call, and he kind of just went over what we're all just been talking about as far as budget-wise and things that might happen, or with our budgeting and where we're at. And I let them know that, hey, they kept talking about school starting, in September. And I said, well, in South County, San Diego, we start in July. And he's like, wow, that's like tomorrow. And I was like, exactly. And, my questions with him were around, or statements were around, what's that going to look like? And from what I understand, we're going to get some guidance, but it's going to be pretty much how we determine when we want to be able to start the school safely. So that's important. And then I got invited to be on a call with Oceanside, Chula Vista Elementary, San Ysidro, San Diego Unified, and National School District were on the call. And it was with the Raven Group. It's a public affairs group that San Diego Unified utilizes for lobbying in DC. And they had we were supposed to have Senator Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein's reps on the call, but they had to cancel. But we ended up with Scott Peters' office with Bailey Brown, who did a really good job and tell us we need to advocate for more money right now with the federal government, as we have passed a resolution, and just keep on. We need to organize our parents. We need to organize our teachers. We need to organize everybody. To send letters and let the federal government know we need money for our schools, and not just for 1 year. We need it for a couple of years to be able to survive this. So that was another thing that another call I was on, and I believe that's all I had. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Solis.
Thank you, President Tarantino. Yes, I want to echo Vice President Segura's message about making sure we get out there and get out the word. We're gonna need money. We can't start the economy without schools. Parents can't go to work if their kids are still at home. So if schools aren't running properly, then people can't go back to work. So yes, I was at the meeting at the CSBA, and we focused a lot on that. So if we could get the public to send an email to our legislators just to let them know we need money. Without schools being funded properly, we can't get the economy going. So if we can have the public advocate, that would be fantastic. Also, on Wednesday, there's a special education and extraordinary times CSBA webinar that I'll be part of between 1 and 2:30. You can go on their website and register if you're interested. So I'll be on that. And then on Saturday in the morning, we'll have a delegate assembly. Saturday at I think 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. something like that. But I'll be there, and I'll give a report on our next meeting. And also, the City of National City has partnered up with Catholic Charities, U.S. Naval Base San Diego, San Ysidro Health, and other local community organizations, and hosting a free food distribution at St. Anthony of Padua at 410 West 18th Street. in National City. So they're taking pre-registration just so they don't have people congregating. So people have a certain time to come and get their food. They're taking walk-ups, but they're trying to feed over 500 families. So it's something they already started, but they'll be doing it on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And if you have online access, you can register on ccdsd.org/EFN, or you can do it by phone at 619-323-2841 and choose option 2 to request the food. And they're also trying to do where they deliver the food. Good call and see if you get a time so you can pick the food. If you're not able to show up, and you'll be given food and asked to register there. So I think it's a great opportunity for those in need. And also, if you have time and you would like to volunteer, they're taking volunteers, and that's at ccsd.org/EFDN-volunteers. So, or you can call that same number and let them know you want to volunteer. So there's a couple things that are going on. I know many of our community members need it, so that's something there for them. Yeah, and that's it. So
okay. Thank you, Mrs. Hall.
Thank you. Thank you, President Tarantino, and I appreciate the advocacy efforts and representation of our 2 board members on CSBA's delegate. I think it's really nice to hear their feedback on what's going on in that venue. I would like to thank Dr. Janney and Dr. Alvarez for the really, I don't know how can you even say a decent description for the work they've been doing to provide the online access, the tools, the distance learning, the transfer over to distance learning and all the work that's gone around that, their leadership. Dr. Janney, you're very much appreciated in that effort. And Dr. Alvarez and her team have created a lot of great things. Really, your leadership is shown during this time, Dr. Alvarez. I wanted just to point that out. I think that everyone has done a phenomenal job, but especially our teachers and our support staff that continue to do what they need to do, even behind the scenes where we don't know how much it is. All the effort that they've done just to shift to this and to continue to be there. And we know that the time of physical distancing from each other can be it's a time that takes a toll on somebody. I know because I'm still working full time from home. I've shifted to do that, and I know it can be exhausting. Because everything takes a tremendous amount of effort. Just to get some question answered can take a half a day rather than, the simple walk down the hallway and talk to somebody. It's multiple emails, multiple touch bases. So I admire everything they're doing. And I just wanted to commend that effort. And Dr. Sacheld and her team, each one of them, Dr. Aguirre and his team with the cafeteria workers and all the custodians, Ron, all of your work for everybody doing that has been great. I would like to see if we could get a report on the adult ed budget before the second meeting in June so that we understand, or even before the first meeting in June, if we could understand what's going on with the adult ed and the planning going on there. I think from what I'm understanding, a lot of people don't understand what the plans are going forward. There has been a decent sized reserve in the fund for a long time. So I think the fear is what I'm hearing in the meetings I've had with legislators, they're fearful of those monies being scooped for the general fund unrestricted. And I think we need to be mindful of that. So before we get to that point, we need to understand what they're planning, where the budget is, what's being planned in the 2021 budget for adult ed and even what's currently going on. I want to also thank President Tarantino for having that calendar that I requested, where the board's full year calendar would be in a one, where you could go online, click and see all the budget or the meetings planned for the fiscal year in that. And I see it's on the board website, on the board page of the district website. You can click on that board calendar, and it'll drop down every meeting that's coming through the end of December. What is not there is if when we know what the agenda will be, or even the subject of those meetings aren't yet, that information is not available, but I would think it would be really behoove us as soon as we know, especially with special meetings, when we know what those meetings are being held for, if we release that information as soon as possible, that adds for our, that would enable the public to know what's coming down the road, and it also provides more transparency for what's going on with our board. So doing that, for putting that link out there on the board website. The other, I forget what else I was going to ask, so I can't remember what else. Oh yes, I was in a meeting also. I've been in a meeting with the federal legislators. I've been in the meeting with Dr. Weber last week, was meeting with several others, advocating for our adult ed programs. It was really heartening because two teachers from adult ed were there, gave their stories on what kind of work they were doing, and one of the students that has gone through the adult ed program, she's a success story. She went out and she went on to Southwest College, got her associate's degree, became employed in a particular where she wanted to get her employment. So she came from non-English, non-graduate through that program, graduated, working. Now she's back to get her citizenship. To gain her citizenship. So it's a phenomenal story, really great testimony. We met with Ms. Lachey Collins in Dr. Weber's office because Dr. Weber was in a special meeting up in Sacramento at the time. And we laid out the needs of our district and also the needs of our adult ed school program. We were advocating that their funding not be used to offset the budget deficits that are looming. But I know that every legislator in Sacramento right now is really trying to think outside the box, but are facing some real challenges. I was also in a meeting just this afternoon with Congressman Scott Peters. That was really he was listening to what we had to say as far as our needs. We really needed to have like our one-page document about what we're facing that kind of outlines that information and the budget needs that we will have coming forward. Anything we can get from our finance department on that would be really, really helpful. So I know that they're expecting something to come out of Washington, out of the Congress tomorrow or Monday, related to the next stimulus package. Hopefully, right now it sounds like it's not going to be quite where we need to be. We really need to have about a $350 million package that would identify that much for education nationwide because of what every school district is facing right now. Whether or not that'll ever happen, we can only ask for everyone to join advocacy. If you have any questions or you want to be part of that advocacy, you can email me at the board. My board email's on the website. But I just wanted to thank everybody for everything they do to keep our district going and to be the best you can be in your job, no matter if you're at home, if you're on site handing out food. You are making a difference, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Holland. Unfortunately, I can't take the credit for that drop-down calendar. I bet it was Ms. Faceto and Ms. Estrada working in conjunction with Mr. Parandi and Grants and Communication. But thank you. I'm glad that it worked out. Okay, let's move.
Frank,
Yes.
I just had one more thing. And Paula,
Sure.
you were right. It was 350 billion is what this country's K through 12 needs for a couple years of help. And I wanted to reflect on one thing that I heard Vice President of Sandy Unified School District, Richard Burrell. He said on the call that if, with the 20%, supposedly 20% cut of funding the school districts, or that his school district was going to receive, that would be enough money for them to go until March, and then that would be it. That they would run out of money. There'd be nothing.
Wow.
And that's just not going to work, and you can imagine if we had to try to cut another 20% from our budget, and our district couldn't work. We couldn't our education system wouldn't work, and so we really need to get that funding. And I did have one ask. I understand, and I'm very happy that the paper distribution has started to students who don't have connectivity or computers, and I wanted to see what those guidelines were. Then I wanted to see the utilization of that in our middle schools and our high schools. And that's it.
Okay.
Oh,
All right. Yes, Paula.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot. I was also wondering if we could get at our next board meeting the one ask I wanted was about the special ed report that was supposed to come from a consultant. Where is that? I would like to see it. I think the board should be given that, especially if it's in draft form. Give it to the board. Let us see it, because I think that's one area that really needs our attention, especially now, because I know they haven't released guidelines on that exactly. We know that the federal government is not going to waive any of the requirements of IDEA. They are not going to waive the maintenance of effort. I need to know what that means in our district. What is our maintenance of effort right now? What are we meeting that on all 4 areas? There's 4 different areas that you have to meet maintenance of effort. If you don't, you have to meet it at least one of those 4 areas. If you don't, you can provide reasons why you didn't meet it, but you continue having to meet that same level every year after that. Once you say, I can't meet it and here's why, and they grant you a waiver, then you still have to meet that from 4 or 5 years back. So I'd like to know where we're at on that, and if we could have that presented to us, I would appreciate it. If the board could have the draft report from the consultant, I would really appreciate it. I think that is crucial information we need going into this next few months. So thank you.
Okay. All right, let's move on to F4, which was to a report on legislative updates, and that was pulled by the public.
Yes, I have one speaker. Comments are from Nick Marinovich. First question, can somebody tell the public exactly what does this committee do and why was it formed? I have a wild idea on how this board might show some leadership. Contact these local legislators who can actually make a difference in bond oversight and sponsor reform. With the failure of 4 of 6 local school district bond measures, there is a collective what happened? Coronavirus? Taxpayers fed up with requests for more funding and wondering what did they do with all the money? General voter fatigue with taxes? Negative impressions of local school districts due to bad financial management and damaging media like that associated with Sweetwater? Taxpayers want more accountability for the spending. If this state truly has significant local school facility needs and needs new local bond funds to do so, it is going to need a better system to hold districts accountable. Citizens bond oversight needs an overhaul sooner rather than later. In theory, these oversight committees and audits were supposed to provide more active, independent accountability by interested citizens. There is one little problem, the legislative detail. Most of the control over what happens for these oversight committees is by those very people who are being held accountable, the school board and district. They pick the members, decide the rules and regulations of the committee, decide what information they will receive, possibly control the agenda, determine what will be audited and how members will or will not be trained on the purpose of bond oversight. The problems are there is lack of clarity on what is the specific project list to be funded mentioned in the state constitution for bond measures, and districts will use broad generalities in bond language measure to justify many questionable projects. The membership and makeup of the bond oversight committees are often individuals who have a conflict of personal interest, that is, friends and relatives of board members. Business conflicts as members of the construction trade unions with project labor agreements, and those who are appointed to be largely rubber stamps for the school board who selects their overseers. The school district attempts to frustrate the intensity and veracity of the oversight function through controlling the bylaws of the oversight committee and or refusing to provide requested information. The performance audit required by the Constitution is largely ineffective at getting at real issues related to the bond program performance. Oversight members are poorly trained and have no real concept of their roles and responsibilities. All those with an interest in bond programs, from school district members and staff, construction firms, organized labor, and citizen taxpayers, should push now for legislative reform to increase accountability and what goes along with it, public confidence that the money is being spent wisely. We must work together if we are going to get voter approval for funds that are sorely needed by school districts and weed those out who can just never seem lost for finding ways to spend more taxpayer money. There are no further comments.
Okay. Then we will move on to item K1 that was pulled by. Yeah.
If I may.
Sure.
Perfect. Would it be good? Would it be okay to invite our CSBA? I forgot the title that they have, but Raquel Madden to come to our next meeting to give us Pacer. Thank you. So she can give us an update of things that are happening that I think it'll be good for everybody to hear.
Okay.
She's very good at what she does.
Yes, she's addressed us before, and it was very informative. So we'll work on making that happen. Okay, Mr. Solis, I think it's a good idea. Okay, item K1 pulled by both Mrs. Hall and Mr. Segura. Mr. Segura. And K1 is, just for a refresher, the approval of consultant agreements over $5,000.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Yeah, so I'm full support of this, of the E-rate consultant. My question was around, I know we have it's at a cost of like $98,000 plus. If that's all up front, because there was something in there on the payment schedule, so Article 3, which we didn't have, where we could have a payment schedule where we could break it up. I don't know if that's possible or that's my question.
Okay.
Mr. Tarantino, that'll be Mr. Dela Casada.
Okay. Welcome, David.
Good evening. Good evening, President Tarantino, Board of Trustees, and Superintendent Janney. You referred to the E-rate consultant. However, you referred to the $98,000, which is associated to the financial true course consultant. So in terms of the E-rate consultant, NBLS, or Nancy Van Lagen Scott, her fee is all up front. It's $37,000. And so that's provided at the beginning of the year, and that was negotiated so that we could get the best cost at from her if we provided her with the cost up front for the year.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Segura?
Yeah, I don't agree with it, but that answers the question. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mrs. Hall.
Yes, I'm also pulled that item for the consultants. I appreciate the explanation about the E-rate. I was more concerned about the true course consultant. I know that when Mr. Dela Casada was hired as a district architect, our hope was that we'd be not having the need of this consultant, but for various reasons, we continue to bring this forward. And unfortunately, I'm not sure what the plan is for the transition into N4. I would like to request, this is probably something I should have brought up during F3, but I would request to have documented the plan for transition to N4 from True Course, what the milestones are, what the timeline is, what the training plans are, when we can expect certain milestones to be met so that we as a board can keep our finger on the pulse of that transition, because clearly it's been taking us years, even though the intention was to do this back in 2018. We still are not there. And now with COVID, even though we wouldn't have the in-person meetings, a lot of this work may certainly be done virtually, just as other people are working virtually. So I would really request that the board be provided that information so that we can monitor it. And I believe that we know the sooner we have that information, the better. So I would request that, because we've been every month been approving items for the instructional tech or the information technology division, contracted licensing, the whole place where they've got their equipment now and all their, backup servers. This one right here, these two different consultant agreements are over $130,000. And as we were learning at our last, during the tier 3 or the third interim presentation, there isn't going to be wiggle room at all next year. And we keep approving, which is why I keep bringing up why we're doing it. This one, I happen to agree we have to do it. But I just wanted to point it out that we keep approving things where there's not going to be money. So I'd like to see what that plan is so we can monitor it and we can ensure that we get that transition completed. That will alleviate a lot of these kinds of costs in the future. Thank you.
You're muted, Mr. Tarantino.
Sorry. With that, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the report on consultant agreements over $5,000.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second, Nick.
Moved by Hall, seconded by Segura. Madam Clerk, will you call for the vote?
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino,
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, we're going to move on to M1, which is approve and ratify planning and construction consultant agreements and amendments, and that was pulled by the public.
Yes, I have two speakers. The first speaker is Kathleen Cheers.
Okay.
And so it begins. Amendments, change orders on a very controversial project. A review of agenda item indicates original fees of $14,800. To date, the board has approved an additional $170,000 in fees. Historically, on M1, backup information for consultant agreements, there has been detailed information identifying precise dates, amounts, and the necessity for each prior amendment the board has approved. A review of this agenda item in its entirety offers little to no information documenting the rationale for this amendment. Additionally, it appears on this project carte blanche is being given. I base that on the fact, once again, this is a ratification. Trustee Hall has requested repeatedly she is not in favor of ratifications. I trust she too has pulled this item questioning the ratification of bond dollars being spent versus approval. The second speaker is Nick Marinovich. My comments on this letter are not directed at line staff. The criticism falls on the most senior management for allowing this item going forward without more backup on historical change orders and the reason for such changes and information on the status of the project. This is yet another example of incomplete staff work associated with the culture of this district. Say as little as possible and hope nobody asks questions. Moreover, on a global scale, how can you justify a $20 million project, $15 million of which is a pool and support facilities, when we have crumbling older schools and you are in the face of an operational budget crisis? The optics alone are cringeworthy. This aquatic center is like inheriting money that was stipulated for fixing or enhancing your home, and rather than use it for the basics like electrical and plumbing, you build a backyard pool. At the same time, you have your salary reduced because of the recession, but you build anyway, even though you probably cannot afford to operate it. This is exactly the path taken by the district. If there is a student, God forbid, that has some type of injury due to not fixing a safety problem because funds were spent instead on an aquatic center, shame on this district. Sweetwater does not have clear district-wide priorities for funding projects. Our committee has been asking forever for this information. Our local elected officials need to take notice. There are no further speakers.
Okay, if there are no further speakers and no further questions or discussion, I will entertain a motion to approve / ratify planning and construction consultant agreements and amendments.
I'll make that motion for approval.
I'll second. Moved by Segura, seconded by Tarantino. Madam Clerk, will you call for the vote?
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is item Q3, which is adopt resolution number 4673, designating the week of May 17th to 23rd, 2020 as Classified School Employees Week. And that was pulled by Mrs. Hall.
Yes, thank you, President Tarantino. And I just wanted to say how grateful we are for our classified staff, whether they're top administrators or the part-time janitor at the school, landscapers, office assistants, instructional aides. They're key to who we are and how we deliver services, how our teachers are enabled to do their work. And I just wanted to say this is a good year to really recognize how key classified workers have been during this time of physical distancing and sheltering at home. Because of them, we have our communities fed, especially the highest need communities have been giving food. That is one of the things that I was speaking to Senator Ben Hueso recently, and he said, we need to make sure our communities are fed, and they have been doing that work. So I'm grateful, and I wanted to recognize that, and I'm glad we're adopting this resolution for next week. Thank you.
Would you like to make a motion to adopt?
I'll make the motion to adopt, yes.
Is there a second?
Solis.
Motion made by Hall, seconded by Solis. Madam Clerk, will you call for the vote?
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
motion passes
Motion passed.
5-0.
Thank you. Next item is Q4, which is the adoption of resolution number 4674 in the matter of implementing reduction or discontinuation of particular kinds of service as to employees who receive a notice of layoff and did not request a hearing. And this was pulled by the public, Mrs. Hall, Mr. Segura, and myself. So we'll go with the public comments first.
I have 3 public comments.
Okay,
The first is from Alex Anguiano.
all right.
Oh, hold on, I don't know what happened. There, I'm sorry. My name is Alex Anguiano. I am a chemistry teacher at Hilltop High. This is my 34th year employed by the district. I am a past president of the Sweetwater Education Association. I served in that role for 8 years. I am speaking as an individual. I was stunned when I first read the RIF agenda item that was ultimately approved by this board at Chula Vista Middle. Stunned because I have seen elements of the document before. What you voted on was partially plagiarized from a document that was presented to a mostly corrupt school board in 2012, a document that I became intimate with. I have homework for you. Acquire the same agenda item that was presented to the board in 2012. Look at the number of social science teachers that were ripped. Compare it to what you voted upon. Do the same for the PE teachers. Think about it. Is it a coincidence? Or were you presented with a lazy analysis of what would be a method to deal with our fiscal issues from the folks that help you to make fiscal decisions? The odds the same numbers in the same two areas occurring under a thoughtful analysis are astronomical. Look at the rationale that was cited in 2012. The rationale cited a California fiscal crisis. Look at the document that you voted upon. What you voted upon was the plagiarized rationale from what was presented to the board in 2012. The rationale that you voted upon had nothing to do with what was said by the district prior to the vote. Nothing. Now ask yourself this. Do the employees of the Sweetwater Union High School District deserve more than a partial cut and paste job coupled with a shotgun approach? Excellent teachers have begun to explore other opportunities. Some are on the list that you are about to vote on. Some teachers will be recalled to different sites. Children will be without health insurance. Did you consider asking exactly how the numbers that you voted upon were determined? It is an important question considering what your vote will be putting teachers and their families through. Thank you. The next comments are from Alec Contreras. Dear Sweetwater Board of Trustees, I would like to speak on my behalf for you to rescind my layoff notice and status. I do understand the ramifications that have led up to these circumstances, and I am willing to be as flexible as possible in order to accommodate others during this difficult situation. I, however, feel compelled to advocate for my students and fellow staff regarding the growth of the physics program at Hilltop High School and my role in it. I began working with our students who had a sense of fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, partly because I was a first-year teacher, but also because of the past reputation and troubling experiences that some students had before I inherited the program. The low morale that my students felt towards the subject motivated me to do my best to establish trust, implement social and emotional values, and put together a curriculum that reflected the values and skills of the 21st century. Thanks to the district, I have been able to connect and get support with and from other staff, from Chula Vista to all other parts of the country that feel the urgency of presenting physics to our students through diverse mediums of education, which in turn end up as meaningful experiences. I know this because there have been so many inspiring learning moments within our classroom where students could collaborate, argue, present, write, and even laugh as they engage in subject matter with their own personalities. These moments have encouraged our other students at Hilltop High to enroll into our class, as evidenced with the enrollment in our master schedule. There is also continued effort by the majority of my students through distance learning, as many of them envision taking the AP Physics 1 course. And because of this, it gives me hope that our physics program is growing and will continue to grow without the previously felt fears from our students and with scientific curiosity. I am very grateful, and I still plan to take and reflect on the meaningful lessons that this experience has offered me. But if I do get the opportunity to return, I will do my best to continue in my professional development so that we could strengthen our learning community with my style that is focused on adaptability, the human being, and teamwork. Again, I would not know where I would be without the many teachers and lessons that this district has been able to connect me with, and it shows how much you, as district, were able to invest in me. I would love to continue our work because I am confident about the importance of engaging our students and engaging them in the belief of a society that needs critical thinkers, equity, and social and emotional support. Thank you for your time. The next comments are from Jenny Piles. To Dr. Janney and members of the Sweetwater Board, my name is Jenny Piles. I am requesting my name to be removed from the resolution list. I was at Sweetwater offices on March 20th before 4 p.m. to turn in my request for hearing. When I arrived, the district office was closed due to the mandated shutdown by Governor Newsom. Had the district office been open, my name would not be on the resolution list and I would not be speaking to the board today. In retrospect, I should have reached out to my union representatives to find out what to do with my request for hearing form since the district office was closed. At the time, the week of March 16th through 20th was extremely stressful in both my personal life and professional life. My focus was on the well-being of my parents, who both have dementia, and my fiance and his son, who both suffer from depression, ADHD, and PTSD. I was also worried about my students and what the shutdown would look like for their progress. There was much to do that week to secure the safety and well-being for the people under my care during our current global pandemic. I am the coordinator of the CPA and CTE Academy of Hospitality, Tourism, and Recreation at Hilltop Senior High School, the only hospitality program in the district. I am also an ELD teacher with experience in 3 school districts, LA Union, San Diego Union, and I don't know what SUHS is, but that's the district she listed. My credentials are California Single Subject English, California Clear Multiple Subject, CTE Marketing, CTE Hospitality. My request is the board will remove my name from the resolution list due to the district office closure and reconsider all teachers on the resolution list due to the government mandated shutdown the week of March 16th through 20th. Many thanks for your consideration. There are no further speakers.
Okay. Mr. Segura.
Yes, so I know that as the resolution says, that on February 24th, 2020, the majority of the board passed that resolution 4689, and I cannot support this resolution. There's many things that I still think we need to talk about in open session, about what's being affected, what libraries, are being proposed to close, what, the learning centers where my son, who's 1 class away from graduating, will be, thank you to the Learning Center teachers at Hilltop High and all Learning Center teachers. I just have too many questions that, is going to let me support this. That we're having, programmatic changes with these RIFs, and I'm not sure what the admin and then the excess list is going to look like. I think we need to have those discussions in open session at a board meeting. And so for those reasons, I cannot support this resolution.
Okay. Mrs. Hall.
Yes. I want to know what I'm not sure I'm really clear on how those RIFs or how the notices went out and how they were supposed to be accommodated about bringing in their request for a hearing. But I do know that I've never heard a comprehensive plan presented on what these reductions are coming to us. I do know that the superintendent said providing them the ability to do RIFs would give them the flexibility needed. But as we heard tonight in the third interim presentation, it seems like those decisions were absolutely taken by the superintendent as being her map on how to move forward. I don't remember, I didn't vote for it. I still feel that it's not appropriate to RIF people and lay off people without due process in a public hearing here in our district before the board, who are the people that are responsible to provide direction and ensure that we move forward. I know that we need to make cuts. I know that we've requested cuts at the top. I don't see anything listed here that would indicate that we've been listed, or the staff is being directed to do that. But I also want to hear what happens with these cuts. These people will definitely get layoff notices, and there's no guarantee that they will be brought back. And like the one lady said, she tried to drop off her notice. So what kind of accommodation and understanding are we doing for our employees? And what legal ramifications if this isn't passed tonight?
Mr. Tarantino, can you start with Dr. Glover?
Sure. Dr. Glover, can you weigh in on the questions about the notification process, the ramifications of this not passing? And Mrs. Hall, I don't remember, there was one more question that you asked, and I didn't write it down.
I asked for a legal opinion as well.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay.
But I welcome Dr. comments, so.
Okay. Dr. Glover.
Thank you, President Tarantino, Board, Dr. Janney. The notification process was per the PKS adoption. Every one of the teachers that fell within side of our particular kinds of service reduction were receiving notices both from in-person service from their administrator, and then they received 2 mailed copies, and they had a deadline by which they were supposed to turn in their request for hearing. And HR manned the front desk, even though the building was closed, it was there covering for if anybody would come through that had to turn in a form or needed guidance. So we were manning that, including myself, the last half hour on the Friday that everything was due. So we took phone calls and opened doors, came out the parking lots with masks, et cetera, to accept forms from people who came by to try and drop those off. Taking us back further, all of this starts when we do our process in December with building the budget. Schools are given an allocation, and from there, the sites assign teachers, and teachers that they don't have enough sections for, they become what are called excess teachers, and they're put into our pool. And then that number of teachers, which was well over 100, starts to indicate if we have too many staff members. And we've heard about these kind of comments before when we talked about position control. So the excess staff members are the part that makes up part of our RIF. In addition, we considered outside factors like the Chula Vista Elementary School District and their potential.
Dr. Glover, we lost you.
Tom, we lost you there. We lost you here, the last part of what you said. Starting with, we factored in the information from the Chula Vista Elementary District.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
My apologies.
No.
So we factored in also potential loss of students to the enrollment also from the Chula Vista Elementary School District expanding. And all of this is also pre-COVID, where we're also being impacted in attendance. The ramifications that you asked about would be if this resolution doesn't pass, it could affect all of our other additional layoffs and limit our ability to right size with staff.
Okay, Ms. Carbuccia.
I think to follow up on what Dr. Glover said, because layoffs have to be done in seniority order, a failure to approve this item tonight, really, we would not know what the analysis was. It could potentially put the entire reduction in force at risk from a legal perspective. From a legal perspective, additionally, and I'm going to point out kind of what Dr. Glover said, we put all of the folks that received those March 15th notices on notice that by May 20th, we needed to receive their paperwork in writing, and it needed to be received either personally hand-delivered or mailed to the district office. And that was the mechanism by which they were told that they had to participate. And we did have staffing there to make sure we met that request. And so right now, making a modification to either allow someone to request a hearing after the fact would cause legal ramifications and difficulties because that hearing process has already commenced and various motions and waivers by the folks that did request a hearing have occurred, and adding additional parties to that could potentially put the entire hearing at risk.
Mrs. Hall, are you satisfied? Well, is there anything else? I don't know if you're going to be satisfied or not, but is there anything else that you would like to ask or get clarification on?
No, thanks.
Okay. My question, I have two questions. Again, my first question is, whose responsibility was it to notice or to notify the individuals that were declared excess and received layoff notices by March 15th? That it would be probably in their best interest to request a hearing. Is that our responsibility? Is it the association's responsibility? Is it a joint responsibility?
If I may, our responsibility is notifying the potentially affected employees that they have a right to request a hearing. So like I mentioned earlier, that was articulated to them when they were personally served, in 2 copies of written correspondence, but also above and beyond that, we did meet with the association and spoke to them about the fact that we've advised their folks that they have a right to a hearing. And my understanding is the association also held a meeting with their affected employees. I can't speak to that affirmatively, but that's my understanding.
Okay. And then Mrs. Cheers, a member of the public, asked a question in her comments about the impact of furlough days on this list. If the associations had agreed to furlough days, would there have been an impact on this list? I guess that's what I understood her question to be.
So this is Karen, and so for the 2 furlough days, which is equivalent to about $2 million, that is approximately 20 to 24 positions, teaching positions.
Okay.
Or certificated positions.
Okay, total.
For the 2 furlough days.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And then I guess my last question is, has there been a demand to bargain the impacts of the PKS by both SEA and SCGA at this time?
That would be Ms. Carbuccia.
Thank you. So yes, we have received a demand to bargain from SEA. We reached out to them and have got that on calendar for next week. We have verbally received a request for this week, and we verbally have heard after asking that SCGA would like to bargain, but we have yet to get that in writing.
Okay. That's all I have. Mr. Solis, Mr. Pike, do you have any questions on this?
President Tarantino, if
yes.
I may?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you. With regards to this still being a possibility where we can get, we don't have to lay off as many people if there's still some negotiations. There's still a possibility there?
That would be Ms. Carbuccia again.
So negotiations, we've consistently requested our partners to come to the table with us. We've expressed to them that our philosophy was to make potential work year reductions in different fashions to avoid doing layoffs. As of this point, that hasn't been reached as an agreement with any of our certificated. We welcome the opportunity to still have those discussions to find ways to mitigate the number of individuals that have to be reduced.
Okay, so we can still do this. That's like the bottom line. We can still do this. So I hope and I pray that works out, because the less people we can get rid of, the more people we can help and help our district as well. So let's try to get that done. And with regards to the question, the comment that was brought up by Mr. Anguiano about lazy analysis, can we clarify that about the 2012 analysis with social science teachers and PE teachers?
So, Dr. Glover, can you talk about the process that was used to determine the list on the PKS, the particular kinds of services needed or not needed?
So I'm pausing for a second there. The process is similar every time you do layoffs. You're going to look and see at what would be potentially excess staff due to the number of allocations at sites. Then if there's any other mitigating factors, you would add on to that. Having spent a lot of time on this, He's definitely entitled to his opinion about the analysis, but with the outside factors like Chula Vista Elementary School District and continuing declining enrollment, it's hard to pinpoint that exactly. But when you take a look at a student schedule, everybody takes social science every year. Everybody takes math every year. So those numbers are relatively consistent with a few higher numbers inside the science areas because of the general sciences. And we added a few more folks because the outside potential growth of middle schools for Chula Vista Elementary School would not affect high school positions. That's why you might see more in the science area versus biology or chemistry.
So
Is now
So-
exiting.
So saying that the 2012 analysis was used for this year's analysis is just, it's not a true statement.
That's not a true statement. Was it referred to? Yes. I'm a historian. I'm going to look at historical documents of what's been done in the past. That's why I can also tell you the action we're recommending that the board takes today was also taken in the past. I believe it was 2013 when the hearings got postponed, but we have to statutorily notice the folks that did not respond by prior to May 15th. Otherwise, they will not be laid off. So that also has happened in the past.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Pike, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, Dr. Glover, what kind of time frame are we looking at between the fact that if the unions decide that they want to come to the table and take the furlough days, which would save their people jobs, what kind of time frame are we looking at before the deadline expires and it can't happen?
I think what you would see is anything that works to mitigate the number of positions. We'll be going through our process to work through layoffs and hearings, but anything that mitigates it means that we're able to offer more positions and people would be called back by seniority for the position that they're credentialed to teach. So whether it's working with the bargaining units and mitigating factors, or the advocacy you spoke about earlier today with money coming from the feds, the state, the local, whoever has it and giving it to us, all those could mitigate the number of folks that use the board make a choice as far as where we would put those resources. So any one of those things could help us mitigate the number of people affected.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, then
I just have one more comment. I just want to thank
go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to thank the looks like 300 emails that I received in support of the librarians. I appreciate the librarians. I'm sure I know we all appreciate the librarians, but I appreciate getting those emails and understanding that. And then I have one question. So is there an excess list or excess list already generated? And if so, who has seen it and who has it? And in regards to teachers, and is what I'm asking, or I guess anybody who's on the list.
So Dr. Glover can explain the difference between an excess list and this list. Dr. Glover?
Correct. The excess list is generated from the sites and departments if they no longer have allocation for personnel, specifically in the certificate area for this. The layoff list is completed through the process of evaluating the PKS, the number of FTEs, and then going through seniority to see what would be the bumping process for that. So those are the two different lists. And if just because you're on an excess list doesn't mean that you're necessarily on a layoff list, because you could be more senior than another employee in the same credentialed area.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Tarantino?
Yes, Mrs. Hall.
Yeah, I just have another. So a lot of factors went into determining how many layoffs. you would need at this point in time, including a reduction or the factor of Chula Vista Elementary School District expanding their at least 6 schools into charters at the 7th and 8th grade level. What was the number of FTE that were affected by that calculation?
Again, that's Dr. Glover.
Well, I did say Dr. Glover, didn't I? And Dr. Sawkeld, because she would calculate the FTEs based on how much money we would be able to have based on loss of enrollment. So whoever can field that question.
The FTE, hello, this is Dr. Glover. The FTE was calculated according to basically the loss of potentially 1 6th grade class at each one of the elementary school sites. So we took a sample middle school and doubled their number of employees that could potentially be lost. So I want to say it's about 44, Ms. Hall.
So how many FTE, how many enrollment did you calculate that on?
I calculated it based on potentially 1,500 students.
Okay. And so and we don't know for sure if that's going to happen yet. We were being very cautious at that point in time. The board has not had a discussion since, or have we even had a discussion about that? In a public, it's not clear to me how much we've discussed in a public setting about the various cuts, the impact, the public discourse we've had about the impact. I know that a lot of what was discussed and on that third interim budget solutions was certificated staff, which included the closure of learning centers, cutting out all the librarians. We've never had a public discourse about all that, have we?
Were you going to say something, Mr. Tarantino?
Well, I was going to say in our discussion of the PKS, I think some of that was brought up in terms of who would be what we would do. At least that was my recollection.
Well, the PKS, as I recall, was presented as we had to do those notices by March 15th in order to give flexibility to the district moving forward so they could do some planning. But we've
Correct.
Never had a public discussion since. I don't think we've ever held a public meeting about that with our constituents, asking them for their input. Has any notice gone out to any of our learning center parents about the fact that learning centers would be sheltered in this plan? What is exactly has been shared? That's my, and I think that's what's being tied back to what Mr. Anguiano's comments were. It feels like the same type of the climate is similar, and I understand when there's deficits and you got to make cuts, it's hard. I'm sure that's the way maybe you, Mr. Tarantino, and you, Dr. Janney, felt when you were being when your jobs were cut or whatever happened when you made the decision to retire. Those things happen. They do present a lot of difficulty for people for the very reasons we're talking about. But it seems to me that we haven't had a full discussion in a way that really is transparent for our community and the teachers and all the different staff members that may be affected by this. But I do understand the timing of it. I think it's really unfortunate. It's hard. It's a hard decision to make, and that's what I'm going to say. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, if not, I will accept a motion to adopt Resolution 4674 in the matter of implementing reduction or discontinuation of particular kinds of service as to employees who received a notice of layoff and did not request a hearing. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, will you call for the vote?
Solis,
Yes.
Ike,
Yes.
Segura,
No.
Tarantino,
Yes.
Hall,
I can't support this without further public discourse.
motion passes 3 yes, 2 no.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is Q6, which is adopt resolution 4676, recognizing the Adult Education Division. And it was pulled by the public and Mrs. Hall and myself, but based on previous discussions and what Mrs. Hall has brought up previously, I withdraw my pull. So the public. Ms.
Yes,
Vasita.
I have one speaker. Comments are from Kathleen Cheers.
All right.
I, as a longtime South Bay resident and graduate of the Sweetwater Union High School District, would like to acknowledge the profound, influential role adult education plays in our community. A community's strengths are dependent on those who live within its zip codes. The fact our district has understood offering education to our adults is a reflection of the value added in incorporating education to all, regardless of age, socioeconomic standing, or citizenship status, has a positive trickle-down effect. Parents who strive to educate themselves further stand as a beacon of light for their children. Children who see their parents working, parenting, and keeping a home, then going to school at night, serves as an instrument of instilling the importance of education. It appears the new director, Dr. Burke, has worked diligently to turn the adult ed program around financially. Speaking as a member of the community, I would like to recommend continued support of this program and would like to see and hear from those students who participate, perhaps a quarterly comment from 2 to 3 of its students willing to share their story. I thank the board, Dr. Burke, the adult ed staff, Dr. Fulcher, and Dr. Janney for their efforts in helping our community's residents. There are no further speakers.
Mrs. Hall.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to also draw attention to the fact that the adult ed has played a crucial role in our district, in our community. Not only are parents often given a second path, something to elevate themselves and their families, but it also enables their children to see their parents striving to become more educated or to do more to elevate their own career, technology, their citizenship, all the things that were stated by the previous board member. I do want to hope that the board and the community will be vocal advocates to support for the state legislators and federal legislators to continue to support education funding. The Perkins, I know the Perkins and the WIOA from the federal funding is really key, that they keep that funding stream open and fully funded for that program, along with our state legislators. If we had never swept $3 million or whatever it was back in 2012 out of the adult ed fund, they would have had over $22 million still with COLA, and that $3 million every year. Calculated, that was a loss of about, over those years, about $23 million. Maybe it's larger, but that's what I believe I calculated. So I think it's key that we continue to advocate for that funding so that programs stay robust and strong, and that we don't use them to balance our budget. But thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hall. And I will reassert my poll. To Mrs. Hall, Mr. Solis, and Mr. Segura, there seems to be a perception within the adult division that the state legislature is looking at cutting their funding. Have you guys in your talks, either through CSBA or individually with people in the Senate and the Assembly, is that something that is percolating in Sacramento?
For me, I've heard some discussions in a budget committee. A subcommittee of the legislature was discussing flexibility options that as a solution for what we are facing down the road. I don't know that they specifically mentioned adult ed funding. I think they were referring back to a similar flexibility that was done back in the 2000 during the recession when they had the tier 1 and tier 3. They swept a lot of what were considered categorical programs and what were block grants into where districts could opt to use those as general fund unrestricted sources. So I think that's what they're referring to.
Okay.
People still remember how that, because again, since we were elected, we've been hearing about how adult ed has never been made whole since those funds were swept out of their own program, and it took them getting a particular grant, their own fund, separate out of where they got the $13 million they've been currently living with since then, 2014 or something, 2013. So I think they're very conscious of that and sensitive to what that means to their good moving forward. I don't know about anyone else. So.
Thank you, Mrs. Hall, for that clarification. That was helpful to me. Yes, Mr. Solis.
I have not heard anything about cuts, but what I can do too is ask our pacer, Ms. Raquel Marquez, Madden, if she could look into that for us too.
Okay, and if she's going to make a presentation at our next board meeting, if she could include that, at least yes. What she's hearing, we're not going to hold her to it because things are fluid, but at least she has a pulse on what's going on. And if she could include that, if she's going to make a presentation to us, then that would be helpful to all of us and to the people in the adult education division as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
Mr. Segura, do you have any comments?
No, I hadn't heard anything else I hadn't heard any talk of adults to adult ed, and I was going to suggest what Trustee Solis just did, so we'll just have to wait and see, and I'll ask around though.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if no further questions or discussion, I will entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 4676, recognizing the Adult Education Division.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second, Solis.
Moved by Hall, seconded by Solis. Madam Clerk, will you call for the vote?
Solis?
Yes.
Ike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Want to thank everybody for listening in. Thank you, board members. Thanks to Mr. Rubio, Ms. Macedo, Ms. Estrada for making this virtual MS Teams meeting work. And with that, I adjourn this meeting. Good night.
Good night.
Stay well.